This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto hid his true self and raised by Kurenai. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
While recovering from his injuries from yesterday, a 5-year-old boy lay on his hospital bed. He had blue eyes, blonde, spiky hair, and facial birthmarks from whiskers. As he reflected on what had happened yesterday, his eyes were emotionless. As he did, he pondered why the people in his village would beat him. His birthday was yesterday, October 10th, which also happened to be the day the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. The fourth Hokage killed the Kyuubi, and regrettably, the day Konoha lost the great Hokage. I hope to be as great and well respected as the fourth Hokage was someday. However, I am aware that I will never be as great as him because I make too many mistakes. Otherwise, I would be beaten every day. The only explanation is that I make mistakes. All I want is for them to not hit me so hard at this time of year. He is mistreated every day, but yesterday was different. The attackers yesterday were a group of inebriated individuals who happened to see Naruto walking by. They were drowsy, unsteady, and slurred when they spoke. Rewind, Naruto was on his way home after spending yet another birthday by himself. Why do I feel so isolated? As he walked home, he wondered, why must the gods play with my life? He would have given himself a birthday present, but he couldn't afford anything he desired. He was aware that the people in the stores overcharged him, but he chose to ignore it because he was powerless to stop it. He soon came upon a bar crowded with mourning men and women, who were yelling the names of the deceased and crying. Naruto felt sorry for them, but once more, he was powerless to help them, so he ignored them. After a block, he heard yelling and angry voices coming from behind him. As soon as he heard them yell, "Monster, demon spawn," and "Just die already," he became terrified. The gods apparently decided to have a little fun with his life because they were bored, despite his prayers that they weren't speaking to him. When he turned around, he saw that the same individuals from the bar he had passed had followed him, half-empty bottles in their hands and hate in their eyes. At this point, Naruto was fully in front of his crowd. "See, can I help you all?" The men in the crowd sneered at this, but the worst of them all was the one who answered. The man hurled his bottle directly at Naruto's face and exclaimed, "Yeah, there is something you can help us with. You can die and go to hell." Knowing instantly that it was a mistake, Naruto automatically ducks under the bottle. When he saw the man's expression shift from mild anger to rage, his eyes widened. After that, the group gathered rocks and threw them at Naruto. Instead of attempting to avoid it this time, Naruto allowed it to strike him, doubling over in agony, and then fell to the ground. He attempted to get back up, trying to ignore the pain in his stomach, only to further enrage the mob. "Stay down, you evil demon!" cried a woman in the rear. Naruto was completely taken aback by this. She was referring to him as a demon, but why? Another object, this time a bottle, struck him in the forehead before he could finish thinking. Raising his hands to his forehead, Naruto collapsed back onto his back. Then more people kept hurling objects at him. Anything that wasn't nailed down, including bricks, rocks, empty and full bottles, purses, and coins. When he looked up, Naruto was still cowering on the ground. Then, he thought a girl his age was staring at him, but he wasn't positive. The thing that shocked him the most was that he could see tears streaming down her cheeks. Is she crying for me or because of me? He wanted to see for himself, but because he was still being beaten, he was unable to get up and observe. He blacked out from the pain halfway through the beating. When she saw his eyes close and his arms go limp, the girl who was actually watching started crying. Then she sensed someone behind her, and when she looked up, she saw her father, who was furious. By this time, some members of the mob had lost interest in mistreating the demon child. The majority of the mob agreed, but they continued to beat Naruto like savages despite one person saying, "It's no fun when he's not awake to feel it." The man's remarks and these people's behavior disgusted the young girl and her father. Although she didn't have to wait long for this to end, she wasn't sure how much longer she could handle it. She soon saw her father approaching the crowd in a march. She chose to follow him because she didn't want to be excluded. Her father halted in front of the crowd and gave them a furious look, and she followed closely behind. She heard him begin to speak as soon as she realized he had the whole mob's attention. So he roared, "What are you people doing?" and put an end to the violence. The first man sneered, as if he were talking about a market trip, "We're beating the demon to death." The young girl was disgusted by the man's remarks once more. This boy, then, had Kyuubi sealed inside of him. He must have to deal with this kind of thing every day, poor boy. Demon? Are they crazy? He seems like a typical boy to me, the young girl thought, quickly growing irate herself. At this point, he was furious and could not stand the drunks in front of him any longer. What demon? All I see is a disgusting bunch of low-life drunks beating on a poor, helpless child. Leave. Now, before I get really angry. The man who initially hurled the bottle at Naruto stepped up and questioned the other man's authority, grinning haughtily. And what would happen if we don't? While the inebriated man merely laughed, the other man closed his eyes and exhaled loudly through his nose. Huh. Like I thought. No. Without having a chance to finish, the man flew 10 feet into the air and landed roughly 5 yards away. He moaned as he landed in a heap before passing out. The man across from them had only his open palm where he had clearly struck their leader, from where he hit the drunk, now unconscious man behind them, leaving the other inebriated men and women of the mob to watch in shock. The man in front of them made them all cower and flee. The young girl rushed to the unconscious boy and placed his head on her lap after she was certain the crowd had dispersed. Her tears had long since dried up, but as she gazed into the unconscious face of the unidentified boy, new ones broke free. Her father smiled reassuringly and placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. Hinata was somewhat relieved by the statement. He'll be okay, Hinata. If he is who I think he is, he'll be okay. After everything she had seen, she at last found her voice. She muttered, It's strange. Hiashi's expression was one of obvious confusion as he gazed at his daughter. Although Hiashi wasn't in a rush to get an answer, Hinata took a while to respond when he asked, What is Hinata? He was surprised she had said anything at all, given what they had just witnessed. At last, Hinata resumed her conversation. I've never met this boy, and never seen him before today, but I can't help but cry for him, feel completely destroyed from. Earlier, it's like they were hurting me while they hurt him. When Hiashi saw that she was looking up at him with a perplexed expression on her face, he smiled, even though at first he thought she was being a little irrational. He remembered something very close to his own heart, a very similar situation that he had once been in. What's so funny, father? It's nothing, really, it's just what you just said. That's exactly how I felt when I first met your mother. With a flush, Hinata turned back to face Naruto. Her blush deepened, and she lost her voice once more before regaining it. Hinata, do you like this boy? She asked. With her face still flushed, she said, Father, I don't even know this boy. I'm just concerned for his well-being. For a few minutes, Naruto felt something moist land on his face. He didn't recall seeing a cloud in the sky, so he assumed it was raining. Then two voices reached his ears. One belonged to an older man, and the other to a young girl. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw who was speaking to the young girl. He overheard her say, Father, I don't even know this boy. I'm just concerned for his well-being. He saw that it was the same young girl he had seen crying earlier when he narrowed his eyes. She was still crying, as Naruto could see. Is she still in tears? Why does she still cry? He pondered. As far away from the adult as possible, Naruto leaned against the wooden fence beside him and sat up, startling the girl. He glanced anxiously at the girl before him. Once he was certain he wouldn't fall to his side. Her lavender-white eyes initially drew his attention, and he initially thought they were strange, but in a good way. In fact, he thought she was adorable and they were adorable. What made me think that? His cheeks were slightly flushed, and he turned his head. Then he plucked up the courage to turn back to the girl. Innocently, he said, Why are you circa crying, pretty girl? His question startled Hinata, who became even more flushed. That was not what she had anticipated him saying. With his eyes as big as saucers, Naruto questioned, Did I do something wrong? He raised his arms above his head in self-defense, clutching his knees to his chest out of fear of another beating. He sobbed, thinking somewhat logically, I thought that maybe she was different, that she really cried for me. I'm sorry, won't do a day. Again. Just page please, Don't hit m.me. I was foolish to think that way. An insect's life is just as significant as mine, if not more so. Still not realizing Hiashi was there, Naruto started to get up when he felt a hand resting on his shoulder. He chose to risk seeing whose hand was on his shoulder because he was already terrified. Hinata's hand on his shoulder and her melancholy smile caught him off guard. Naruto was most taken aback by her next statement. I'm not going to hurt you, what's your name? Naruto was shocked that she had asked him that. He had never been treated so kindly in his life as Hinata was at the moment. Naruto felt like he was going to fall asleep, but he chose to respond to her even though she continued to smile at him while she waited for his response. His eyes darted all over and his voice faltered as he said, Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Hinata chose to embrace Naruto because she felt so sorry for him. Naruto balled himself up again as soon as he saw her extend her arms, placing his own arms over his head and embracing his knees. He believed that she would despise and harm him now that she was aware of who he was. Rather, she hugged him for a few seconds and gently pushed his head into her lap. Naruto began to feel drowsy as Hinata ran her fingers through his hair. He felt himself going unconscious, so he was unable to ask Hinata her name. His last recollection was of Hinata screaming his name, a metallic odor in the air, and a sudden cold liquid reaching his hands. Naruto. Hinata noticed his eyes abruptly closing and sensed a damp hand in his hair. She noticed his blood all over it when she looked at it. At first, she couldn't believe she didn't feel it. As soon as the mob dispersed, she ought to have taken Naruto to the hospital. However, she was unable to make her legs stand and could not feel them. Rather, she began to panic. Naruto. Naruto. Hishi, who had been silent the entire time, abruptly got Naruto out of Hinata's lap as she sobbed. After nodding in agreement, Hinata and her father made their way to the hospital. Let's go, if we don't get him to the hospital soon, it might be too late. Hinata prayed that Naruto would be alright because she was anxious. All Hishi cared about was getting Naruto to the hospital. If only you could see how stupid these people are, said Minato. End of flashback. When Naruto heard his hospital room door open, he stayed motionless. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone enter his room. He scooted toward the other edge of his bed, flinching instinctively. When the third Hokage noticed that Naruto was awake, he approached him. However, Naruto threw his hands over his head and drew his knees closer to his chest when he was 2 feet away. Naruto screamed, "Please, don't," and the third stopped moving. Silently, "No," he said. The third person asked Naruto, "Naruto, are you okay?" The third viewed Naruto as a grandson, and it devastated him to see him shy away from him. Naruto. I said no. Naruto uttered in a hateful tone. The third Hokage was the one person he felt he could trust the most. However, as far as Naruto was aware, the third had not assisted him in any way other than providing him with an apartment, though he was aware that this was insufficient. The idea that the only adult he trusted was not supporting or even watching out for him was painful. He couldn't spend another minute with the man he had initially believed he could trust, and now that he had lost that trust, he jumped out the window of his room. He was unaware that his room was located on the 3rd floor. The ground was hurtling toward Naruto. Right now, he didn't want to die. He hoped that his death would be painless as he closed his eyes. But he never experienced his body touching the floor. Rather, the wind blew through his head. The ground beneath him rushed past him as he opened his eyes. When he looked up quickly, he saw that someone had prevented him from falling. He was unable to speak. It seemed that someone had saved him after witnessing him fall to his death. What if this individual finds out who I am? We're pretty high, so I hope he or she doesn't leave me. The individual landed close to a massive mansion shortly after saving Naruto. Naruto had the opportunity to examine the individual who had saved him. A very attractive woman with crimson red eyes that matched her lips and long, flowing black hair. She appeared to be very young and a chunin. She then lowered herself to meet Naruto's eye level. Are you okay, kid? When he heard her ask him that, Naruto, who was already terrified, froze. In all his life, no one had ever inquired about his well-being. Then she straightened up and appeared a bit more serious. Retrembling, Naruto threw his arms over his head once more. What are you doing? She inquired, completely bewildered by Naruto's behavior. Why does he flinch like that all the time? Naruto didn't because he didn't know how to respond to that. Knowing that he would not be responding to her anytime soon, the woman sighed. Is she upset with me? Did I fail to respond to her? As he lowered his arms and accepted the beating he believed was imminent, he thought. She stepped closer to Naruto and said, come here. After stepping back and taking a seat on the sidewalk, Naruto returned to defend himself by balling himself into a fetal position. Does he truly believe that I will hurt him? Why does he do that? She thought this in jest, but she realized it was serious when she noticed that he was trembling. He truly believes that I will harm him, she thought brilliantly. Naruto gave her a disbelieving look and said, I won't say this again. Naruto, come here. She recognizes me, but she still managed to save me? In order to avoid upsetting the woman, Naruto walked directly beside her. As soon as he was close enough, the woman lowered herself to eye level with Naruto once more, embracing him and kissing his forehead. Poor boy, I thought, must have been through a lot so far. She gave me a kiss on the forehead and now she's hugging me. B however, why? W. Who or why? You. The woman smiled warmly at Naruto without responding to his query. After thinking, I just don't understand girls, they were so confusing, he said. Please, don't waste your smiles on me. I'm not worth it. Naruto swiftly pulled away from her embrace, leaving her standing on the sidewalk where she had placed him. The woman gasped, having never heard anyone say they weren't worth smiling at. All he wanted was to return home, so he prayed that nothing more would happen to him. He heard her footsteps behind him and continued running until he was close to his house. He ran 2 blocks before running into someone and landing on his butt. He noticed another boy on his own butt when he looked up. As quickly as he could, Naruto stood up and assisted the other boy in standing up, but the moment he did, he pushed Naruto back down. With a feeling of superiority, he stood over him. You better watch where you're going, idiot, he looked at him. Naruto got to his feet, bowed, and began to apologize. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you. Naruto wanted to run, but he was unable to move his legs. The boy ran to Naruto, ramming his knee into his stomach, causing him to double over in agony, and Naruto could only watch in terror. However, he didn't stop there. Naruto flew across the street after he punched him in the chin. He prepared himself for more when he stood up, tears streaming down most of his cheeks. The boy's sly grin deepened as he said, "Why are you crying? You're supposed to be a boy and boys don't cry. Besides, I'm not done playing." The pain became unbearable for Naruto, and everything became hazy. Naruto's eyes widened in terror as he realized what this meant. No, not once more. Then, with his body still upright, Naruto blacked out. The boy grinned when he saw Naruto's entire body go limp. The boy asked, "Giving up already, huh, weakling?" And Naruto was unable to respond, infuriating his opponent. The boy ran up to Naruto once more and threw a fist directly at his face, but it never made contact. "Well, I'm not, so here I come," he said. His face slowed as Naruto's hand stopped him from making a fist. The boy noticed something that startled him when Naruto raised his head to look at him. Naruto's eyes had changed. They were a mix of red and green with a swirl in them. Naruto's fist struck the boy's stomach before he realized it, sending him flying across the street and colliding with the side of a building. The boy's entire body ached from that single blow as he stumbled to his feet. But the boy who had bumped into him was weak, and he didn't want to lose. The boy went on the attack once more, running back at Naruto and roundhouse kicking his head. Before the kick could land, Naruto ducked, grabbed the boy's foot, twirled him around, and then sent him flying back across the street and into the wall he had already been thrown into. The boy's entire body was hurting now, making it impossible for him to move. In an instant, Naruto was standing over the boy, his eyes full of rage. Then, in an attempt to deliver the final blow, Naruto pulled his fist back but stopped. Naruto's entire body tensed, then relaxed again. After regaining consciousness, Naruto turned to face the world. The boy beneath him was in agony when he looked down. Naruto was in too much shock to say anything. The boy, believing Naruto would do nothing, got up and fled, saying, "I could have sworn he would have died. No one's ever survived after I got my consciousness back." He had no idea what had happened, but it wasn't the first time. Naruto felt that he had run far enough from the scene of the brief battle, before he collapsed to his knees and looked at his hands. A hand suddenly touched his shoulder. He glanced up and saw that it was the same woman who had caught him earlier. All the woman did was give Naruto a kind smile. "She's going to tell the Hokage and I'm going to be exiled or worse, killed." She said, "Don't worry, I won't tell anybody." Then, like when you close a zipper, she ran her thumb and index finger together across her lips. Then, with his first sincere grin in years, Naruto turned to embrace the woman. Naruto's embrace caused the woman to wince. Does this imply that he has faith in me? Naruto apparently felt the woman wince as he took a step back, believing he had gone too far. "I'm sorry, I just thought." The woman gathered him up and gave him a hug before he could finish. Naruto was too shocked to do anything else, so he simply let the woman embrace him. She withdrew from the embrace after a few minutes and gave Naruto a direct look. He nodded and maintained the same smile. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Are you sure?" he asked, nodding once more. She gave him a doubtful look but ignored it. Naruto shook his head, "No," when asked if he knew who I was. "This woman is really kind to me even though I don't know her." Naruto nodded while his smile lingered on my lips. "My name is Yuhi Kurenai. And you are Uzumaki Naruto, correct?" he asked. She was very kind, even though she knew exactly who he was. Naruto had never been happier than he was at that moment. Kurenai was quite pleased with what he said next. "Are you hungry?" Naruto said hesitantly, "Why?" "Yes." Kurenai smiled once more and took his hand, but he wasn't sure if he could fully trust her despite her kindness. She practically dragged Naruto because he didn't want to see any more adults. Then come on, I know a couple of people that won't mind you, that own a restaurant. All they did was hit him, and they scared him. A younger looking woman was working the register when they arrived at the restaurant. Naruto hid behind one of Kurenai's legs in fear when the woman behind the counter glanced at him. This made the woman laugh, which upset Naruto because he believed she was making fun of him. The woman approached Naruto after ceasing to laugh. She pinched his cheeks, causing him to blush slightly. "I'm sorry, little one. I didn't mean to laugh at you. You're just so cute when you do that." Naruto grinned sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head nervously. His fear of adults was simply greater, despite the fact that this woman was also kind. Then an elderly man suddenly appeared and shouted. The old man stopped when he noticed Naruto hiding behind Kurenai. "Ayame, what are you doing? There are customers." Naruto was terrified. This old man continued to yell at him, frightening him even more. Naruto has been yelled at all of his life and is still unaccustomed to it, as no one should be. After giving him a look, the elderly man grinned. Kurenai moved behind Naruto to give the old man a better view of him and pushed him slightly forward. "Well, who do we have here? A little boy, huh? What's your name, young man?" Kurenai asked. Kurenai demanded, "Come on. Tell this nice man your name." Naruto glanced back at the elderly man from Kurenai. The elderly man appeared eager to learn his name. When the elderly man said, "N. Naruto, Yu Uzumaki and Naruto," his smile grew. Naruto gave him a perplexed look and said, "Nice to meet you, Naruto. My name is Tucci, and I own this ramen shop." "What is ramen?" The elderly man seemed to understand Naruto's thoughts because he stated. He turned and headed into the kitchen, but Naruto spoke again before he could say, "It looks like you don't know what that is, so how about this? I let you try one." "No, don't." The man and everyone else in the room appeared to be perplexed by this. "ID. Don't want to be. Bother you. You'd only be wasting your time on M.me. Naruto whimpered and thought she was going to hit him when the younger woman, now known as Ayame, embraced him from behind. He leapt out of her arms on impulse, ran to Kurenai, hid behind her legs once more, and closed his eyes. She was the only woman, person, that he believed he could rely on. Naruto nodded his head and turned to face Ayame again. "I'm sorry, he's had a lot in his life, so he has trust issues. Though it seems he trusts me now." Rather than being irate as Naruto had assumed, she leaned over and grinned at him. The elderly man quickly joined in, saying, "Don't worry, Naruto-chan, I'm not mad. But I hope I can earn your trust soon." Tucci, the elderly man, went to his kitchen to make this ramen. "Me too. And don't worry about this ramen, it's on the house." Ayame ruffled Naruto's hair as Kurenai lifted him and set him down in one of the chairs. Tucci returned carrying a large bowl of ramen. Suddenly, Naruto got up from his chair and took a whiff of his food. Ayame and Kurenai both squealed as he sniffed it like an animal, possibly a fox, but Kurenai's was so low that few people could hear it. Naruto began eating after grabbing some chopsticks from the container. He had a great time eating the ramen. Naruto ate it so quickly that by the time he was done, everyone was staring at him with amusement, which caused him to duck his head and turn a deep red. Kurenai picked him up and said, "Thank you, Tucci, really. Naruto, don't you have something to say?" Taking his head off her shoulder, Naruto uttered. With a smile and a nod, Tucci said, "Thank you, sir. It was really delicious." After that, Naruto closed his eyes and rested his head back on her shoulder. Kurenai waved goodbye and walked out of the ramen bar, saying, "I'll see you later, Ayame, Tucci." She eventually came to a halt and yanked him away from her. Naruto attempted, but was unable, to control a yawn. "Now Naruto, I'm sure you're tired by now, right?" Naruto asked, "Okay then, where do you live?" After noticing his apartment, he gestured toward the dilapidated apartment on the other side of the street. At first, she appeared surprised, but then she became irate. Kurenai just gave him a tighter hug and left his house after he sobbed into her shirt. "I'm sorry if you don't like it but it's all that was left. W. Where are you taking M.me? She didn't respond. He remained silent the entire time because he was a little afraid of her angry expression. Hokage. Sama has no right to give Naruto such an apartment. When Kurenai noticed the Hokage tower, she somewhat slowed her pace. She placed Naruto down in front of the third Hokage's office as soon as they entered. Kurenai went inside to speak with the Hokage after saying, "Wait here, okay? I'll be back in a moment." While he waited, Naruto overheard several of the adults using derogatory terms like demon spawn, demon, abomination, and others. He didn't know what he had done to deserve so many derogatory names, and he didn't understand it. When he saw Kurenai, he rushed into the Hokage's office and grabbed her leg, tears running down his cheeks, because he could take it no more. Kurenai yelled at the flinching Hokage, "Do you see what these idiotic villagers have done to this poor boy? Do you see why I'm here right now? His whole life has been like he is right now. He needs more than that useless law, and you giving him some crappy apartment that looks like it could fall on him at any second. He needs someone there for him, an adult, someone like me." Naruto's hold on Kurenai's leg tightened even though he knew he wasn't being yelled at, so she picked him up and gave him a gentle hug. While glaring at the Hokage, "Shush, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be so loud. I see what you mean, but there's nothing more I can do about the situation. I've done all I can. The council has control over domestic trials and laws. I already pushed it by insisting on giving him that apartment. If you want to take him in, you're going to have to talk to the council." The third Hokage responded. Naruto gave him a brief glance before averting his gaze. "I'm sorry, Naruto." The Chunin laughed and said, "TCH, fine." Kurenai left Naruto in her arms and said, "If I have to talk to a bunch of stubborn old jerks, then that's what I'll do." He saw one tear drop from the Hokage's cheek as he turned to face him again. He nodded his head as he began to nod off as the stress of the day took hold of him. "Okay, Naruto, you're coming home with me today, and then tomorrow, I'll talk to the old men to ask to make it permanent. Is that okay with you?" he asked. "Go to sleep now, Naruto. It's a long walk back to my house," Kurenai said, letting out a gentle sigh. He put his head on her shoulder and dozed off as soon as she said that. She spoke again after she was certain he was asleep. "I promise you, Naruto, I'll make sure you're safe." She laid a kiss on his forehead before heading home. Naruto woke up in a cozy bed. Naruto had never had a comfortable bed, so this was enough to make him get off it. What took place yesterday? As he searched his mind for memories of the day before, he recalled being attacked, the girl who had sobbed for him, the hospital incident, running into the impolite boy, and Kurenai telling him he could stay at her house. After he calmed down a little, he left the room, wondering where Kurenai had gone. He heard sounds coming from what he thought was a kitchen as he was moving down the hallway. Nervously, Naruto said, Good morning, Kurenai-san." Kurenai smiled and turned to face Naruto, giving him a hug as she spoke. "Good morning to you too." Kurenai stood up and walked back into the kitchen, shaking her head, while Naruto scratched the back of his head and stared at the floor, saying, "I hope I didn't cause a lot of trouble for you." Kurenai kept circling her arms and going from the sink to the stove, saying, "You were no trouble at all, Naruto." When Naruto's curiosity overcame him, he asked without thinking. Kurenai stopped and asked Naruto, "Kurenai-san, what are you doing?" Her eyes were questioning. It was quiet and subdued, but Kurenai could hear everything. "I mean, you keep moving your arms all over and moving around the kitchen. I was just wondering what you were doing." She gave him a smile before returning to her previous task. Kurenai interrupted Naruto without even glancing at him, saying, "I'm making breakfast. I get hungry in the morning. I know that you do as well, and I'm not letting you leave until you eat something." Since arguing would not help, he decided to sit down on the table and wait until I was done. "And I'm not taking no as an answer, so you might as well sit down on the table and wait until I finish." After a few minutes of waiting, he made the decision to speak once more. Kurenai shrugged and went on with her work, saying, "Knock yourself out. The plates are in the cabinet to your left and the spoons, forks, and knives are in the drawer next to me. Can I at least help set up the table?" Kurenai asked. After giving a nod, Naruto stood up to arrange the table. Since he could reach the knives and forks, he grabbed those first. Kurenai turned her head slightly so Naruto could see her smile. Naruto returned the smile and placed the knives and forks on the table. Since the plates were more than a foot above Naruto at the top of the cabinet, his next task would be difficult. In order to avoid disturbing Kurenai, Naruto picked up the closest chair and positioned it in front of the open cabinet. He then climbed on top of the chair and found himself tall enough to easily reach the plates. He grabbed 2 glass plates, ignoring the creak he thought he heard. The chair exploded beneath his feet, sending him and the plates to the ground as if the gods were still bored. As the plates broke into 1,000 pieces, Naruto automatically rolled out from beneath the falling ceramics. As soon as Kurenai heard the chair shatter, she spun around and ran to Naruto, who covered his face with his hands while flinching from the women. Kurenai also watched as her plates broke. He started to cry, but Kurenai held him at arm's length and examined him, so he stopped short. I'm sorry, I can pay for." With concern in her voice, she asked, "You're not hurt, are you?" And Naruto gave a stupid shake of his head. He stammered and said, "NNN number." Kurenai slapped the back of his head lightly and sighed with relief. "What were you thinking? You could have hurt yourself. I could have helped you get the plates down." Naruto gave Kurenai a hug and hoped she would forgive him, saying, I know. I just didn't want to be a bother. Why don't you?" Naruto nodded contentedly and took his place at the table. "It's okay, really. I have more plates and you're safe. That's all that matters. Now come on, breakfast is ready, but this time I'll get the plates." Throughout the entire meal, neither of them spoke. Naruto was pondering a question and unsure of how much longer he could hold it before exploding. Kurenai had to find out what he wanted after noticing the expression on his face. Looking up from his plate, a little surprised, Naruto exhaled loudly before speaking. "What seems to be bothering you, Naruto?" he asked. "It's just..." Naruto appeared to be considering his question too much. "Nothing." Naruto shook his head and carried on eating, saying, "No, Naruto, tell me." Naruto realized he was in a losing battle, so he said, "Naruto, I'm not going to ask again." Looking at Naruto doubtfully, Kurenai asked, "What's it like being a ninja?" "Should I tell him? Well, it pays the bills, that's for sure, and, well, it's very strenuous. Takes a lot of hard work to be a ninja. Not only that, but you need the drive to be a ninja, determination and most importantly, heart." Naruto gave her a questioning glance. "Heart?" Kurenai closed her eyes and considered her next words. "Yes, heart. You see, most people say that ninjas should be emotionless because supposedly emotions cloud your judgments and you make mistakes." Naruto was perplexed and said, "But the way I see it, emotions can make a ninja stronger. Emotions divert your attention, logically. If emotions can divert you, how can they strengthen a ninja?" Kurenai went on as though she could read his thoughts. "You see, if the person you love is hurt or threatened, wouldn't you do everything in your power to keep them safe? Wouldn't you give your all to save your precious person?" I guess. Exactly, you'd probably protect your precious person even as you breathed your last breath. I understand now. Thank you, Kurenai-san. Trying not to look at Kurenai, Naruto turned to his right and asked, "Glad to hear it. Now, is that all that's troubling you?" "Well, there is something, but I'm sure it wouldn't happen." Naruto shifted around in his chair, searching for the right words to ask. "What is it?" Kurenai choked on the egg she was eating and coughed it out slowly. I was wondering if you'd be able to get me into the academy so I could become a ninja." She asked, "You want to be a ninja?" Naruto gathered herself and nodded. "Well, sure, but only if you really want to." Kurenai nodded and said, Really? Really?" Naruto leapt from his chair, embraced Kurenai, and thanked her repeatedly. Okay, that's enough. Go get ready because we need to get you new clothes." Without hesitation, Naruto shook his head and released Kurenai. Unfortunately for Naruto, clothing cannot lie. "I couldn't ask you to get me new clothes. Besides, there's nothing wrong with the clothes I have on." He had 3 holes in his pale black shirt. One under his left sleeve, one near his neck, and one near the bottom left. He's fortunate to have a thin string holding up his shorts because they would be falling all the time and tripping him. She stood up and picked up the dishes she and Naruto had just used, saying, "Nonsense, my treat." Naruto hurried to the bathroom and said, "Hurry up and take a shower. I'll have fresh clothes you can borrow from my neighbor for you by the time you get out." Kurenai can still kill Naruto no matter how much he trusts her. Naruto emerged from the shower after he was done and surveyed the bathroom's exterior. He noticed black sweatpants and a gray shirt. He grabbed it and dashed back into the restroom. He hurried to the living room to change. Kurenai was patiently waiting on her couch when he saw her. Naruto was standing in the doorway when she looked up. She said, well, look at you, quite handsome." Naruto blushed. She laughed, got to her feet, and approached Naruto. He nodded and they left her house together. "You ready to go?" he asked. Kurenai yelled at the council, "What do you mean he can't live with me?" After a productive day with Naruto, she was eager to live with him and spend as much time as possible with him. The store clerk glared at Naruto when they first entered the store to buy him new clothes, but Naruto was blissfully oblivious to his glares because Kurenai kept him too busy to notice. In addition to 5 blue sleeveless sweaters and 5 pairs of black shorts that fell about an inch below his knees, Kurenai also bought him 5 white shirts with a gray spiral in the center of the back. In addition, they purchased 2 pairs of black ninja sandals for him. She was somewhat relieved that they had completed their clothing shopping because Naruto had been merely smiling and nodding while Kurenai showed him the new outfits, displaying no other emotion. Naruto happily accepted Kurenai's offer of more ramen as they were leaving the store. She could tell he was happy, even though he remained silent the entire time. She dropped him off at her house after they finished their meal so she could talk to Konoha's council. She assured him he would see her again, but he gave in and parted ways. They rejected her request when she went to the council to ask Naruto to live with her as a guardian figure rather than through a formal adoption. A council member said, with a haughty tone in his voice, "What we mean is that we deny your request to take in Naruto." Simple as that. Kurenai was already frustrated with the council, and this was making matters worse. In the hopes that they wouldn't have a valid excuse, she asked, "And why do you deny my request? What reason do you have to deny it?" Kurenai was praised by her fellow council members when a councilwoman demanded, "Why is it you want the boy to move in with you?" with a sardonic smirk. Without missing a beat, Kurenai shot back, "That is none of your concern, and is trivial compared to your reason for denying my request." The councilwoman sat down, realizing she had lost the argument. The council members muttered as they considered what rational justification they could offer for rejecting her request. Kurenai merely grinned, but the others nodded in agreement, saying, "He is a troublemaker. He needs to be punished." The council muttered among themselves once more, discussing whether or not they should agree. "Yes, I agree. He deserves to be punished. But how are you going to do that if there is no one who has authority over him? He needs someone to act as his guardian. And I say I should be his guardian." They were about to make their announcement when someone rushed into the room, nearly tearing the doors from their hinges. "Stop this meeting!" yelled Sasuke Uchiha, who surprised everyone by entering the room with a broken arm. A council member asked, "Sasuke Uchiha, what business do you have here?" As he approached the person who spoke, Sasuke grinned. Kurenai looked on bewilderedly and raised an eyebrow, saying, "I'm here to tell you that I've been attacked." Kurenai, who wasn't particularly enjoying the boys' company, said, "I'm sorry to say but that has nothing to do with us nor with this meeting, so if you'd please leave." From outside the room, a voice called, "Oh, but it does Kurenai, it does indeed." He went on when the individual entered the room. The expression on Sasuke's face made Kurenai realize that it has everything to do with this meeting. "Oh no." As he moved to stand next to Sasuke, Mizuki, a recently appointed Chunin, declared, "The person that attacked the Uchiha was none other than Naruto Uzumaki." "There's your reason, Kurenai. The boy is a menace. I agree with you that the boy needs to be watched over, but it will not be you. It will be an Anbu who we see is competent enough to watch over and control the damned child." The member of the council confirmed. The other members concurred right away. As soon as possible to eliminate any possibility of disagreement, the member said, "So it shall be." As Sasuke and Mizuki grinned arrogantly, Kurenai was rendered speechless. Kurenai stood motionless as the speaker said, "This meeting is over. Kurenai, you may now leave." She only exclaimed, "No, it's not over," before two Anbu showed up and pulled her out of the room. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to break free from both Anbu's grip. "I apologize, Naruto. I've let you down." Kurenai thought about how he could tell Naruto that he couldn't stay with her as he walked slowly home. She arrived home earlier than she had intended to, and she sighed as she unlocked the front door. When she entered, she saw Naruto eating from an ice cream package while covered in chocolate. His cheeks, clothes, and hair were all speckled with chocolate. Naruto waved and grinned broadly when he saw Kurenai. Unlike Naruto, her carpet was surprisingly free of chocolate stains. Before continuing to shovel down more ice cream, Naruto said, "Hello Kurenai-san." Kurenai shut the door behind her with a gentle smile. Trying not to show her sadness, she said softly, "Hey there Naruto." More chocolate fell into Naruto's face as he continued to shove the ice cream into his mouth. Kurenai watched him stuff himself with ice cream and laughed quietly. Recalling the news she had to deliver to him, she grimaced. Naruto had paused his meal long enough to observe Kurenai's face. Before getting to his feet, Naruto glanced at her, then at the ice cream, then back at her, and finally at the ice cream once more. He went to Kurenai after getting the ice cream. It wasn't until he was holding the ice cream directly in front of her that she realized he had moved. In an attempt to persuade her to take some, Naruto said, "Have some Kurenai-san. It's really good." Kurenai couldn't resist, grinning, and grabbing a fingerful of ice cream to eat. Naruto didn't like the sound of that right away. "Naruto, there's something I should tell you." Naruto let the ice cream drop to the ground upon hearing her say, I'm sorry Naruto, but the stupid council with all their wisdom didn't want you living with me." He was incredulous and simply couldn't comprehend why he wasn't permitted to remain with Kurenai. But why?" he asked, desperately trying to hold back his tears. After witnessing Naruto's expression, Kurenai also had to hold back her tears. Naruto turned to face Kurenai and said, "I'm sorry, Naruto, but I'm not allowed to say." Kurenai didn't immediately respond, giving Naruto the impression that she knew both. You mean you know why they didn't allow me to stay? Or do you know why I'm hated? Tell me. She began to say, I can't, but Naruto interrupted. Naruto cried as they broke out of their captivity, saying, yes you can, I know you know why I'm hated. You're probably the only one that'll tell me. Please, let me know why I'm hated so much. Kurenai argued with herself over whether or not to tell him outright. She let out a loud sigh as she readied herself. Naruto nodded, having heard the tale before. Do you know the story of Kyuubi and his attack on Konoha? He asked. Well, he wasn't killed, couldn't be killed, defeated but never killed. The fourth Hokage was forced to seal him into a child, a newborn. It was the fourth Hokage dying wish that this newborn would be seen as a hero in the eyes of the villagers, but instead they shunned him, hated him, refused to recognize him as a hero. Naruto's eyes widened as this data started to register in his head. The newborn was you. You have the Kyuubi sealed in you, Naruto. I know people think of you as that demon, but I don't. Don't think just because I know this doesn't mean I'll abandon you. She wrapped her arms around Naruto in the hopes that it would. Kurenai was reluctantly hugged back by Naruto. Happy to have at least someone he could trust, he said, Thank you. Kurenai withdrew the embrace to meet Naruto's gaze, asking, so what will happen now, Kurenai-san? Naruto initially questioned who she was referring to until he recalled that he had defended himself against Sasuke yesterday. Well, during the meeting, an unexpected visitor came and told the council that you attacked him. I'm sure by now you know who. As she informed him of the Anbu, Naruto became alarmed. With this information, they said that you would be watched by an Anbu they believe is able to watch over you and make sure you don't cause more trouble. Although it wasn't the best memory, he had previously seen an Anbu. I see. Said Naruto, who appeared to be feeling nothing but sorrow. Kurenai said the first thing that came to mind because she couldn't stand it when he was acting that way. Naruto simply nodded in response to the question, do you still want to be a ninja? Naruto grinned and nodded automatically, saying, well then, how about I help you out? You know, help you understand everything that needs to be understood. For the first time, Naruto straightened up, raised his head, and said with pride, good. I have a mission to do and I won't be back till later today. That's when we'll start. I have to warn you though, I won't go easy on you just because you're young. I have high expectations for you and I hope you reach them. Kurenai grinned as she saw the resolve in Naruto's eyes and said, yes Kurenai. Sensei, I understand. I promise you I will reach your expectations, even exceed them. Switch to 7 years. While you waited for Iruka to arrive, Naruto sat quietly in his seat. To become the best in his class, Naruto has been training under Kurenai for the past 7 years. She taught Naruto how to dispel a genjutsu and how to recognize when he is in one. In addition, she taught him ninjutsu and taijutsu. Although she needed assistance in both areas because she was not an expert in either, she managed to persuade Maida Guy to teach Naruto taijutsu. Although Naruto still gets a little freaked out by Guy's incessant declarations of youth, it took him almost a year to feel at ease in Guy's presence. The Anbu, who was meant to protect Naruto, was the one she chose to teach him about ninjutsu. Rewind, Kurenai was watching Naruto as he practiced some hand seals she had taught him on the first day of training. She suddenly noticed an Anbu perched in a nearby tree. She gestured for the Anbu to accompany them. Despite having doubts about her intentions, the Anbu joined her. Yes Yuhi-san? Asked the Anbu. Kurenai immediately confused the Anbu after laughing at it. What's so funny? Inquired the Anbu. After removing his Anbu mask, the Anbu saw a man wearing a second mask that concealed everything beneath his eyes. Cut the crap Kakashi, I know it's you under that mask. However, his bandana, which covered his left eye, was the most peculiar aspect of him. Kakashi gave Kurenai a smile. Kurenai shook her and chuckled once more, saying, guess I'm not good at hiding my identity as I thought I was. She recalled why she had initially called him down as she became more composed. Listen Kakashi, I know the council sent you to watch over Naruto, to make sure he wouldn't cause much trouble, but I was wondering if you'd do both of us a favor. Kakashi raised only one eyebrow. He inquired, intrigued, oh, and what would that be? Well, 2 favors actually. The first is that you teach him some jutsus and help him understand them, their uses, you know, give him the basics of it all. The second favor is that I'd rather not let the council know of Naruto's training. They'll want to stop it immediately and separate him from me. All I want you to do is make something up every time he's training. Can you do that for me? Kurenai asked in the hope that he would agree. Kakashi pondered while standing motionless. I can help out with his training. I just have to help him learn new jutsus and understand the basics. Yeah, I can do that, but the other favor? Well, that one I'm not sure I can do. What? Why not? Well, because I just can't lie to them. They expect me to report an honest report and you know I'm a bad liar, he replied. Then I'll help you make something up. Come on, you have to help him, Kurenai begged. Kakashi continued to consider it. I don't know. Still seems kind of risky. Fearing that he would pick men, Kurenai questioned, what do you want, Kakashi? Money? Women? Men? Kakashi's face was criticized. He wiggled his only visible eyebrow and said, no, I don't want men. What I do want is something that they sell at the bookstore. Kurenai immediately understood what he meant, and his perspiration fell. Just nodding, Kakashi said, you don't mean? Kurenai let out a sigh. Fine, I'll get you that stupid perverted book, but only if you agree to help me train Naruto and keep his training a secret. Not only to the council though, but to everyone. Got that? Kakashi raised his eyebrows. End of flashback. Naruto retained all of the lessons that Kurenai, Kakashi, and Guy had taught him. Naruto continued to wear the clothes Kurenai had given him. In fact, he had purchased the same items in larger sizes. He purchased fingerless gloves with a metal plate on the back, which is the only change to his ensemble. As everyone ages, he grew taller, but even Sasuke was only an inch or two shorter than him, making him tall for his age. Kurenai enrolled him in the Ninja Academy a year after he began training. Regretfully, Naruto was locked in a closet and shoved by Uchiha Sasuke, who was enrolled in the academy that same day. Kurenai discovered Naruto after he had been in the closet for roughly 10 minutes. When she questioned him about how he got himself locked in, he claimed that he had tripped and closed the door by accident. Kurenai knew he was lying, but she chose to ignore it. Sakura, who claims to be Sasuke's biggest fangirl, has been taunting him non-stop for the past 6 years. He sat in the back with Hinata Hyuga, Shino Aburame, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi on the first day of school. As soon as Hinata sat down, Naruto became friends with her. Even though she had asked him his name in a quiet and apprehensive manner, he could still hear her, and his response was no louder than hers. Sasuke went to interrupt Naruto's conversation with Hinata after noticing it. After telling Naruto that Sakura wanted to speak with him, he got up and approached her. Sasuke then sat down in his chair and attempted to deceive Hinata into not wanting to speak with Naruto. The Uchiha disregarded her and told him to get out of Naruto's seat because she didn't believe him. When Naruto returned, he had a black eye and a large bump on his head. Ignoring Sasuke as if he had her, Hinata got up and escorted him to the nurse. Unfortunately, Naruto was told he was fine by the nurse, who then threw him out. Naruto isolated himself from the other students by sitting in a chair far in the back of the class ever since. Hinata wanted to assist him, but he refused, telling her repeatedly that he was okay just the way he was. Suddenly, he sensed a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Hinata standing in front of him, smiling confidently and holding her hands behind her back. She was dressed in traditional ninja shoes, navy blue capris, and a light lavender sleeveless Chinese shirt. She allowed her hair to grow to her mid-back. With confidence, she said, "Good morning, Naruto-kun." Hinata's shyness was overcome in about a year. Since then, she had developed feelings for Naruto, which greatly perplexed him. With a gentle smile, Naruto got to his feet. Although he still felt strange around girls, Hinata was different. He would get anxious around her even though he knew he could talk to her without experiencing the same strange sensation he did with other girls. He didn't understand the feeling and largely disregarded it because it was insignificant. Hinata sat down in her chair and gestured for him to join her, saying, "Good morning, Hinata-san." He approached the seat beside her with trepidation. She asked, clearly pleased about something, "So, you excited about graduating?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I want to be a ninja already. I've wanted to be one for 7 years, and tomorrow, I just might be one." Hinata gave an enthusiastic nod. "Are you?" she asked, nodding once more. Then they turned to watch Iruka as she poofied into the room. As Iruka called the first student to take the exam, Sasuke approached Naruto and spoke to him. "Good morning, class. As you know, today is the final exam. So we will now start the exam. If your name is called, come to the class next door. The final exam will be on the clone jutsu. As you wait, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't cause trouble." Hinata got up and glared at the final Uchiha, saying, "Hey Naruto." Everyone knew about the massacre in Uchiha and how Itachi somehow allowed Sasuke to survive. Most of it was aimed at Naruto, but he became colder and more aloof. She yelled angrily, "What do you want with Naruto-kun, Sasuke?" He gave Hinata a glare in return, then turned back to Naruto. Sasuke handed Naruto a water bottle and said nonchalantly, "I just came here to wish you good luck and to give you this." Hinata and Naruto both gave the bottle a questioning glance. Hinata questioned suspectingly, What did you put in it, Uchiha? Sasuke must have done something to it if she knew him as well as she believes she does. Nothing, it's just tea. I saw that you were a little nervous, so I thought you might want to drink some. It's supposed to relax you. Sasuke replied. Naruto took a whiff from the water bottle after opening it. Even though he had doubts about Sasuke's motivations, he drank it when he didn't smell anything. With a sly smile, Sasuke turned to leave. Good luck. Iruka remarked. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto got up and began to move, but he stopped when Hinata gave him a back hug. Naruto blushed and experienced the strange queasy feeling he always gets around Hinata, but it was 10 times worse because of the hug. Good luck, Naruto-kun. He finally said, Thanks Hinata, and walked out of the classroom. When Naruto walked into the testing room, Mizuki sarcastically remarked, whenever you're ready Naruto. After nodding and performing the hand seal to perform the Bushin, Naruto abruptly opened his eyes and screamed. Bushin no Jutsu. Before smoke engulfed him. Iruka and Mizuki noticed 2 Narutos after the smoke cleared. The original was on the floor beside the clone that had been fucked out. Mizuki struggled to contain her laughter as Iruka's eye twitched. Since it was the first thing Kurenai taught him how to do, Naruto didn't think he couldn't do it. Iruka shouted, You fail. Naruto sank into himself and appeared devastated. Come on Iruka. Sensei, he had the right hand signs and he gave it his all. We should let him pass. Mizuki responded. Iruka opened his mouth to respond, but Naruto stopped him. Naruto held his head down as he left the room, saying, No, it's fine Mizuki. Sensei. I didn't do it well enough to pass. I don't want to be given special treatment. He never even returned to the classroom. He simply went outside and sat on the swings. Naruto witnessed the parents of the pupils congratulating their child on their successful graduation. When Naruto heard parents say things like, That's my boy, or, I'm so proud of you, he scowled and wished someone would at least console him. Naruto turned around, peered up at a tree, and uttered. Mizuki was taken aback when Naruto saw him up the tree and asked, Is there something you need Mizuki? Sensei? He leapt to his feet and stood beside Naruto. After a brief moment of hesitation, Naruto followed Mizuki and said, Yes, I'd like it if you'd come with me. Overlooking the sunset, they paused on the roof of an apartment building. They sat down, and Naruto asked, What is it Mizuki, sensei? Mizuki began, Iruka. Sensei is tough, but he's not against you. After a few seconds, Naruto figured it out, even though he didn't understand at first. Naruto questioned, Then why? Why only me? After a brief pause, Mizuki said, He wants you to be strong, with all his heart. But that will never happen if he goes easy on you. He's like you, you know. No parents, no family. Naruto stated solemnly, but, I really wanted to graduate. Knowing that everyone in his class graduated except for him made him feel excluded. Mizuki laughed, and Naruto heard it. Then I guess I have to tell you. Huh? Mizuki grinned and said, It's a secret, but I'm gonna let you in on it. A secret? Naruto had a suspicious thought. Iruka was sitting in his house, pondering what the third Hokage had said, when his door was knocked on. Iruka open up. Mizuki yelled. Iruka got up and opened the door to find Mizuki in a panic. We've been called by the Hokage. It's Naruto, he stole the sacred scroll. Mizuki nodded and went to see the Hokage, asking, You mean the scroll of sealing? As they arrived, Iruka said, Damn. And noticed that the Hokage was having a heated conversation with a number of other Junin. One Junin remarked, Sir, this isn't just some stupid prank. What he did is illegal. That scroll contains information only known in Konoha. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could be the death of us, someone else said. As he dismissed them, the third Hokage remarked, I understand that. Bring Naruto back here, unharmed. They all exclaimed, Sir, before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. He sees the cabin Mizuki instructed him to go to, trees going by, and leaves flying everywhere. Naruto was astounded by how quickly he arrived at the cabin with the scroll on his back. He landed silently in front of the cabin on the forest floor. With a sigh, he looked up at the night sky and saw the numerous stars shining brightly over the earth. He sat down and rested after his run, using the forbidden scroll as a pillow to lie against. Naruto stretched his arms above his head and remarked, I wish I was a star. They're the lucky ones. They're beautiful, bright, and people seem to admire them. Iruka, meanwhile, was desperately searching for Naruto in the hopes of being the first to locate him. Where are you and why did you take the scroll, Naruto? Damn it. As he continued his desperate search for Naruto, Iruka thought. As he attempted to close the distance to Iruka, Mizuki emerged behind him. Iruka, I'll check the woods on this side and you check the one on the other side of the village. Iruka nodded his head. He felt compelled to investigate the woods on this side, but he was unsure of what it was. Mizuki reluctantly nodded and fled in the opposite direction, saying, "No, I'll check this side." Iruka went into the woods and jumped from tree to tree, but he didn't see Naruto. All he saw were trees. Naruto crept to the back of the cabin after hearing someone approaching. In addition to learning 2 new jutsus from the scroll, he also jotted down an additional one. The second one required him to use it on a human, but practice had to wait because he didn't see anyone else to use it on. He had been practicing on the first one alone. He knew he couldn't do the third one until he was well trained, but he put it in his pouch and wrote it down in a scroll because he knew it would be useful later. He had just finished honing the first one when he heard a voice coming too quickly. He was aware that something was amiss, but he was unsure of the precise nature of the problem. To be safe, he set up a trap in case his intuition was correct. Naruto set up the trap and then waited for the person to come by walking in the center of the clearing while carrying the scroll strapped to his back. Since he was the one who told him about the location, he assumed it was Mizuki, but he was shocked to see Iruka leaping from the trees. After at least half an hour of searching, Iruka finally spotted the cabin in a clearing, something he had never seen before. He made the decision to investigate, and while traveling there, he noticed Naruto gazing at him. Iruka shook his head when he saw Naruto's shocked expression after he leapt from the trees and landed 2 feet away. Naruto was even more shocked when Iruka yelled, "Why would you steal the forbidden scroll, Naruto?" Steal? I didn't steal it, Iruka. Sensei. Mizuki. Sensei T. Told me I still had another chance to G. Graduate. He told me all I had to do was bring this S. Scroll here and wait for him. Naruto clarified, to the disbelief of IR. Mizuki? All of this is his doing? Incredulously, Iruka thought. In the distance, a silhouette smirks as it launches a huge projectile called a Fuma Shuriken at the gullible academy student and Chunin. Thankfully, Naruto saw the approaching weapon and realized Iruka was too stunned to react. He pushed Iruka aside, and the shuriken struck him squarely in the chest, piercing his organs. With a dull thud, Naruto hit the floor and lay still beneath the shuriken. He was staring at Iruka with unfocused eyes and a little blood dripping from his mouth. Once more, when Mizuki emerged from the shadows, Iruka was too shocked to respond. Unaware that his fellow teacher and Chunin was now upset with him for his betrayal and for killing Naruto, he turned to face Iruka and said, "I was aiming for both of you, but it seems the demon brat has better senses than I thought he had." With pride, Mizuki remarked, "Looks like I saved the village from the demon." He yelled, "How dare you?" Mizuki scowled and turned to face Iruka. The Chunin with the gray hair asks, "What do you care? Don't you remember he's the reason why you were an orphan? The reason why your parents never came home after his attack on the village?" asked Mizuki. Iruka lowered his head to conceal his eyes. Then Iruka recalled what the third Hokage had said to him shortly after he had first encountered Naruto. The third Hokage remarked, "You know, he's a lot like you, Iruka." "Who is?" inquired Iruka. "Naruto. He's like you in many ways. He has no parents, no one to take care of him. He has to work for everything. Even though Kurenai-san has been there to teach him a thing or two, he's still lonely. One person isn't enough, not for him anyways." Before responding, the third Hokage blew off the smoke from his pipe and asked, "What are you trying to say, Hokage-sama?" "Nothing really, just try to understand the boy. He's been through a lot just as you have. Yes, the demon's the reason why I am an orphan, why my parents never returned after his attack on the village." "So why?" Mizuki began, but Iruka cut him off. "But Naruto's not Kyuubi, he's not the demon that attacked the village. He's his jailer, a hero who keeps Kyuubi from returning to finish the job. And for that, I accept him just as I accept my other students. There's no chance in hell that I will ever see him differently." Iruka grumbled. Both Chunin turn their heads and are shocked by what they see when they suddenly notice someone moving. Naruto smirks at Iruka while standing with the shuriken still buried in his torso. Naruto said, "Thanks for accepting me, Iruka, sensei." And then he disappeared. Iruka sighed in relief as Mizuki's eyes grew wide. He had fervently hoped Naruto would survive, but before he could turn back to Mizuki's situation, Naruto unexpectedly reappeared from underground and struck Mizuki in the chin with a right hook. The traitorous Chunin is launched into the air by his fist, which strikes it squarely. As he observes Mizuki being affected by gravity, Naruto stands with assurance. Iruka ran to Naruto, staring in shock as he hit the ground. Astonished by Naruto's strategy and strength, Iruka questioned, Naruto, how did you do that? It didn't feel right. This secret test that Mizuki Sensei T told me about. When I got here, I started reading the scroll B. But it seemed weird that an academy student had to take a forbidden scroll, T. Take it to an S. Secluded area and L. Learn at least one jutsu from it. After I learned the Kage Bushin, I heard someone coming. I felt uneasy as the person came closer so I made a clone and had him S. Stand here to wait W. While I hid underground. Naruto explained with a timid smile. Iruka placed his hand on his head. Knowing that Naruto was just beginning his journey to become a great man, he was proud of him. Stumbling from the ground and rubbing his chin, Mizuki yelled, you think you won, brat, just because you got a cheap shot? Huh. He was embarrassed that Naruto could hit him and didn't take his punch well. Iruka took a defensive stance in front of Naruto. You will not harm him, Mizuki, not while I'm here. Iruka smiled back at Naruto and said, thank you, Iruka, sensei. Mizuki needed this diversion to start his counterattack. Iruka was struck in the chest by Mizuki's kunai, which neither of them was able to avoid or block. While Iruka fell backwards, the traitor, Turner, murderer leapt back. Naruto caught him before he hit the ground and placed him gently on it. Blood spurted from his body as Naruto bandaged the wound with the kunai. Kurenai had taught him how to apply bandages, but Naruto couldn't handle this. The fact that he was dying and that the only adult who had willingly accepted him besides Kurenai was lying in front of him was too much for Naruto, who then lost his temper. Mizuki watched Naruto's back tense up as he stood in front of them. As Naruto stood up, red chakra began to gather around him. Tears escaped his eyes but vanished due to the intense heat that the chakra was radiating. With all of Naruto's demonic chakra, Mizuki was cowering in terror. With his head turned, Naruto's eyes pierced Mizuki. Both the swirl pattern and the green hue with a touch of crimson intertwined within it had returned. His facial whisker lines became bolder and deeper, and he developed fangs from his lips. His nails also grew, eventually becoming claws. Mizuki was the target of Naruto's newly discovered enmity. As his eyes began to hypnotize his opponent, Naruto exclaimed, how dare you hurt Iruka, sensei. I'll kill you. Before Mizuki could remove the eye's hypnotic effect, Naruto had vanished. Naruto vanished without a trace, and Mizuki didn't even blink. A voice from behind Mizuki asked, what's wrong, can't find me? When he turned around, he saw no one. A fist then smashed into Mizuki's face, sending him flying once more. This time, he went through a sizable tree and landed roughly on the now fallen log and stump. Mizuki stood up, his entire body hurting. As Mizuki staggered back into the clearing, Naruto stayed motionless and unresponsive. Before he created a modified ram seal and yelled, Taju Kage Bushin no Jutsu. After the enormous smoke cleared, thousands of Naruto clones emerged, each one as enraged as the one before it. I'm not done, was all Naruto said. They all suddenly charged Mizuki and launched an all-out attack. Even though Mizuki was too stunned and defeated to launch a counterattack, he was aware that he wouldn't have been able to defeat all of the clones. Naruto rushed to check on Iruka as soon as Mizuki hit the ground, still very much unconscious. He felt a pulse at Iruka's neck, but it was gradually vanishing, so he let out a sigh of relief. Before an idea suddenly occurred to Naruto, he was unsure of what to do. It was for these types of situations that he learned his second jutsu. When the user placed their hands over the injured area, a tiny orange barrier would form around the wound and heal it. This required a specific set of hand seals. The only disadvantage was that using it required an absurd amount of chakra, which would probably kill the user before they could complete the task. However, Naruto didn't give a damn about the repercussions as long as Iruka lived. He covered Iruka's chest with his hands and performed the hand seals. Naruto witnessed Iruka's wounds begin to mend as the orange barrier materialized. Just as the darkness was about to overwhelm Naruto, he noticed red chakra moving around him and felt his chakra reserves replenish. Naruto felt his chakra reserves empty and suddenly exhausted. He then noticed that Iruka's wound was healing more quickly and that the orange barrier had suddenly become darker and more red. Initially taken aback, he assumed it was the demon inside of him. When Iruka woke up, Naruto was standing over him, a red, orange barrier covering his chest. Naruto cancelled the jutsu after noticing that Iruka had woken up. Iruka needed to rest to complete the healing process because he had done enough. It's okay, Iruka. Sensei, Mizuki is unconscious and I sent a Bushin to call for help. Just rest for now. Naruto replied. With a smile, Iruka instructed Naruto to shut his eyes. Despite his initial hesitancy, Naruto proceeded because he was confident in Iruka. Then he sensed a sensation encircling his head. When he opened his eyes after hearing Iruka instruct him to do so, he noticed that Iruka had taken off his Hite headband. The cold metal spot and the warm cloth that was now fastened to his forehead were both felt by Naruto. He gave Iruka a sincere smile and gave him a gentle embrace with one arm while grinning back. Iruka remarked, "Congratulations Naruto, you're a ninja now." Naruto followed Iruka and Mizuki back to the village after Anbu quickly arrived and put them on a stretcher. Waiting for class to begin, Naruto was seated in the same chair he used yesterday. He knew he needed to be bolder and more self-assured after yesterday's events, but he was too scared to say hello to everyone he saw. He was aware that he needed to change, but it was difficult. He was so eager to stay at home that he was the first person in the class. Naruto observed a few of his peers walk into the room. There were some he vaguely recognized and others he didn't really know, like the boy with the red triangles on his face. Naruto couldn't figure out why they allowed him to bring his dog to school. Then there was Shino, a boy who was similar to Naruto in that he was intelligent, reserved, and not very social. Neither Naruto nor the boy had any animosity toward the other. They always nodded their heads when they saw one another and shared a mutual understanding. Other children who he had never met or spoken to came into the classroom. Upon turning his head, he saw indigo hair and assumed it was Hinata when he felt two tiny arms encircle his neck and pull him into an embrace. His stomach began to churn once more, and he could feel the blood rushing to his head. With anxiety, Naruto said, "Hey there, Hinata." Naruto was released by Hinata, who then took her seat. Hinata said, "Hi Naruto-kun, I heard that you failed." Astonished that he didn't stutter, Naruto nodded his head and said, "I did fail, but something happened last night which made me pass." Perhaps he was maturing. "Well, what happened?" Hinata inquired inquisitively. Gazing at his desk, Naruto reflected on what had happened the day before. Naruto gave a hazy response, saying, "Nothing, I just proved that I was good enough to be a ninja." Hinata chose to change the topic since she knew he wouldn't say anything more about it. She questioned, "Who do you think will be in teams?" Although he didn't really care as long as it wasn't Sasuke, Naruto appeared to be considering it carefully and genuinely wanted Hinata on his team. As Naruto continued to look around the newcomers, he saw Sasuke walk into the room and make eye contact with him for the first time. "I'm not sure, but I think we'll find out soon." Sasuke was taken aback, but he quickly covered it up because he believed that the tea would, as Mizuki had claimed, cause the fool to fail. Ignoring the blonde thorn in his side, Sasuke simply grunted and went to his seat, berating his teacher for falling short of the Uchiha ideal of greatness. After a few minutes, two girls rushed into the room and fought for the seat next to Sasuke. The pink-haired girl stopped when she noticed Naruto sitting with Hinata still fastened around his neck. She quickly reasoned that insulting the boy would make Sasuke like her more than her rival. Sakura sneered smugly, "Why are you here Naruto?" "Baka, weren't you the only one who failed?" Naruto looked down, his crest down. I'm here because I'm an N.ninja too. I know I failed but I ended up passing a dot anyways." Naruto responded with trepidation. He thought, so much for changing. Sakura simply snorted and turned to leave. She continued to sneer as she turned, ready to win Sasuke's affection, saying, "I bet it was a fluke. No way you're talented enough to be a ninja, not like Sasuke-kun." More to himself than to anyone else, Naruto uttered the words, "But it wasn't a fluke. I really tried." He hoped that only Hinata could hear him. "Hey, forehead!" shouted Hinata. Sakura came to a halt and turned to Hinata. Sakura asked, "What did you say?" as the room fell silent. "Naruto is talented enough to be a ninja. In fact, he's even better than your precious Sasuke-kun. He doesn't have anything to prove to you, so back off," Hinata screamed. Sakura retreated. No one had ever made Hinata so angry before. Yes, she had only been cruel to Sasuke, but she had never lost her temper. She was too shocked to respond because this was unprecedented. On the other hand, Sasuke was more than willing to demonstrate his superiority over the Uchiha. Sasuke, who was incredibly swift for a new genin and had a kunai up to his throat, materialized behind Naruto in a flash of movement. Sasuke growled at the Hyuga heiress, "You're saying he is better than me? This moron can't even defend himself." But in the midst of this distraction, Naruto, who was now moving more quickly than Sasuke, blurred into thin air and materialized beside a beaming Hinata. She put her elbow on Naruto's shoulder and leaned on him, saying, "That's exactly what I'm saying." Naruto simply stood there idly. Playing the mediator from his seat a few seats away, Shino said, Let's settle down, we don't want to start something we can't finish. In an attempt to calm everyone down, Kiba said, yeah, let's calm down. I personally don't want to get in trouble the day after I graduated, do you? He was usually the one starting trouble, so he was a little out of his depth when it came to trying to calm his classmates down. Sakura and Ino followed him, still complimenting his skill, as Sasuke grunted once more and went back to his seat, thinking, damn, he's faster than I thought. The Junin instructors were in the Hokage's office elsewhere, discussing possible teams. The Junins were impressed by Naruto's speed and intelligence after seeing the brief performance that he and Sasuke gave through the Hokage's crystal ball. The third said, so, who will you take Kakashi? It had been on Kakashi's mind since yesterday. After their brief performance, he wasn't entirely sure if he wanted Naruto or Sasuke to accompany him in training the Sharingan. He turned to the orange book Kurenai had given him the previous week and said, I'll take the Uchiha. I don't really care about who else. As a result of their agreement, Kakashi forced Kurenai to buy Naruto at least one final book before he turned into a ninja. Okay, we'll come back to you, what about you Kurenai? Without hesitation, she declared, I want Uzumaki Naruto. The Hokage smiled and said, and who else? He and the others knew she would take the boy. Kurenai reclined in her chair and considered her options. Hinata was a no-go because she appeared to assist Naruto in escaping his shell, but her third option would be more difficult. She could have chosen Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, Akamichi Choji, or Nara Shikamaru. Asuma informed her that he would take Shikamaru and Choji along with Ino to form the new Ino Shika Cho team, so he was unable to select either of them. Kiba and Shino were the only remaining boys, and they both appeared to be indifferent to Naruto. She simply uttered the first name that came to mind while glancing at the Hokage's expectant face. As she surprised the other Junin with her choices, she said, Hyuga Hinata and Aburame Shino. As Iruka jotted down the new Team 8, the third Hokage remarked, interesting choices. What about you, Asuma? Asuma turned to face his father after extinguishing his cigarette. Iruka recorded the new team after Asuma remarked nonchalantly, Nara, Akamichi and Yamanaka. The third Hokage said, okay, Kakashi, that leaves you with Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inuzuka Kiba. Kakashi nodded while keeping his gaze fixed on the book. Kurenai sighed at his behavior and questioned why she had bothered to reprimand him for constantly reading the book. Iruka.san, go announce the new teams. As for you three, go to the academy with Iruka.san to meet your new teams. Dismissed. With the exception of Kakashi, everyone got up and began to leave the room. The third Hokage raised an eyebrow beneath his hat and said, aren't you going to meet your new team? Kakashi finally looked up from his book but shrugged his shoulders before turning back to it. Maybe after I finish this chapter. Everyone fell silent as Iruka, who had never done that before, reappeared in the classroom in a whirl of leaves. First up, Team 1. Iruka announced the first 6 teams, and then it was Team 7's turn. Now, calm down, everyone. I have the teams and after I announce them, you'll meet your Junin instructor. Team 7. Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inuzuka Kiba. Hinata and Naruto both exhaled in relief. They still had a chance to be on the same team and didn't want to be with those two. Sasuke simply believed that a team would slow him down, and Kiba preferred to have Hinata on his team rather than the Banshee. Sakura silently rejoiced to have Sasuke on her team. Team 8. Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata and Uzumaki Naruto. Hinata gave Naruto a quick embrace, which made him feel something and blush a little. You hear that Naruto-kun, we get to be on the same team, isn't that great? Replied Hinata. Naruto gave a head nod. He looked at Shino and said, yeah, it really is. Naruto nodded in response to Shino's head nod. Team 10. Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino. Despite having some familiarity with the team from her father, Ino didn't like them right away and preferred Sasuke. All Shikamaru said before he passed out was, troublesome. Choji, on the other hand, kept eating his bag of chips. Iruka disappeared in another whirl of leaves, and then Junin began to arrive and pick up their teams. Now, your Junin instructor will pick you up and take you someplace else to introduce yourselves. Except for teams 7 and 8, everyone was out of the room. As he waited for his Junin, Naruto shifted uneasily in his chair. Who did he get, he wondered? Then a Junin entered through the open door. Kurenai entered the room while pulling an unconscious Kakashi by the collar and said, sorry I'm late, my friend over here wanted to be late but I brought him here just in time for you. After abruptly dropping him off at the door, she surveyed her team. Hey there Naruto. Naruto leapt out of his chair and gave her a hug. Naruto had never given her such a hug, and Shino, as docile as ever, simply stood to welcome his new teacher as Hinata watched, a little envious. "Okay. Meet me at the training grounds in 10 minutes, she replied. "Which one?" inquired Hinata. Kurenai made a hand seal and grinned. She was about to go when Sakura got up and said, "You got 10 minutes to figure it out." She half demanded, half yelled, "What about us?" Kurenai was immediately aware of her dislike for this possible genin. She responded, "He'll wake up, eventually," and then vanished. With a shrug, Naruto turned to face his new teammates. The three of them left an angry girl yelling at the unconscious Junin as her teammates sat on opposite sides of the room. Once in the hallway, Naruto said, "Come on, I know what training grounds she's talking about." 5 minutes later, Kurenai was sitting on a stump at the training grounds. Naruto blushed slightly and dismissed the statement, saying, "I'd like to say I'm surprised at your tracking skills, but I know Naruto already knew this place. I want you three to sit down right here and introduce yourselves. It's not so much for me as for you three to get to know each other. You know, your name, likes, dislikes, dreams and hobbies. Usually, one introduce oneself before one asks others to. Why don't you give us an example of what we have to do?" replied Shino. In hindsight, that was a rather depressing thing to hear Shino say, and Naruto and Hinata just stared at him. Clearing her throat, Kurenai tried to recall what the other Junins would say if their students said something similar. "Okay. I'm Yuhi Kurenai. Things I like and things I hate. I don't feel like telling you that. My dreams for the future. Never really thought about it. As for my hobbies. I have lots of hobbies." Team Aid dropped their response. Kurenai simply pointed at Shino with an innocent smile. "Okay. I held up my end of the bargain, now it's your turn. My name is Aburame Shino. I like insects and I hate it when people just crush them for no reason. I have no dreams and I like to study insects with my family." Kurenai pointed to the boy and said, "Good, now you Naruto." Before he spoke, Naruto cleared his throat and swallowed. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen and training. I don't necessarily hate but I dislike it when people pick on each other. My dream is to become strong and respected like the 4th Hokage was, and my hobbies are training and..." Naruto didn't finish his statement because he wasn't that. Kurenai nudged him, and, in a low voice, as though ashamed, Naruto uttered, "And gardening." Hinata said, "Really, me too. We should garden together sometime." She maintained the little garden in the backyard that her father had given her in the best possible shape. "According to Naruto, I'd like that." Pointing to Hinata, Kurenai said, "Okay, now you." Hinata sat up straight, delighted to share with her new team, and simply nodded. While Naruto snickered, Kurenai appeared a little taken aback at the heiress of a very high clan saying, "My name's Hyuga Hinata. I like my friends and my family. I hate stuck-up people who don't know how to take the stick out of their butt." She caught a glimpse of Naruto blushing as she said, "My dream for the future is to be a competent kunoichi and have a loving husband and family." She had an idea, but she wasn't entirely sure why he did. Before completing the introduction, she burst out laughing. "As for my hobbies, like Naruto, I like to garden and sometimes make medicine and herbs." Kurenai registered the information and nodded. So far, she has a logical bug collector, a capable boy with low self-esteem, and a girl with heart, confidence, and backbone. She believed that she formed the right team by selecting the right children. "Okay, now that that's over, let me tell you about the test you'll take tomorrow," said Kurenai. "Test?" inquired Naruto. Puzzled, Hinata remarked, "We already took a test, that's why we're here." She got up and began to leave, saying, "That test was to see who has a chance to be a genin. I am the one who decides whether you become one, or go back to the academy." She paused to glance at her team and said, "Be here tomorrow by 6 a.m. And by the way, you'd probably just throw it up anyways, so I wouldn't eat anything." She closed her eyes and smiled before abruptly vanishing. As usual, Shino stayed passive. Hinata shrugged it off, and Naruto gulped at what she had said. As she stood and stretched, Hinata said, "Come on, let's go eat something, as a team." Shino stood up without saying anything, and Naruto also stood up and grinned. The blonde said, "Sure, but what will we get?" Hinata asked, "Not sure, anyone want anything specifically?" Naruto was considering it as Shino scurried. Quietly, he said, "Well, how about ramen?" By this point, he was a huge fan of ramen, but he found it strange that so few others shared his taste. Hinata said to Shino, "You got a problem with it, Shino?" He simply shrugged his shoulders once more. Naruto nodded and began to walk to Ichiraku's, with Shino and Hinata trailing behind him. "Ramen it is. Lead the way, Naruto." When they ran into Team 7, They were just one block away. Naturally, Naruto took a small step back, separating himself from Sasuke as much as possible without running. Hinata stated coolly, not masking her dislike of the boy, Uchiha. Just as cold, Sasuke glared at her and Naruto with pure hatred and said, Hyuga. When Kiba yelled, Hinata, the tense moment was broken. Hinata's perspiration stopped, but she forced a smile. She forced herself to look happy as she said, Hey Kiba. Kiba ignored Sakura and Sasuke and went straight for Hinata, with whom he struck up a conversation. The four of them remained silent as Sasuke and Sakura stood behind Kiba and Shino and Naruto simply stood behind Hinata. Naruto didn't like Kiba's constant flirting with Hinata, which included saying this and that and lightly touching her arm. Hinata only saw Kiba as a friend and chose to ignore his flirting. Sasuke decided it was pointless to simply glare at Naruto and asked, Hey, you finally ready to quit being a ninja? Naruto began, No, I am a ninja and. But Hinata interrupted him because she was sick of Kiba's persistent flirting anyhow. She said, You better deal with it. Sakura moved ahead of Sasuke as he grunted. She screamed, Don't talk to Sasuke like that. Hinata said apathetically, Why? Are you worried that I'll crush his ego? Please, it's just a waste of time. What did you say? Countered Sakura. Did your large forehead obstruct your hearing? Shouted Hinata. Before Sakura could deliver a punch that would have knocked Hinata off her high horse, Naruto caught it. With a hint of timidity, Naruto said, I believe. Naruto stated rather grimly, That's not the wisest course of action to take. Sakura could see the gravity in his eyes and voice. As this Naruto, really? Since she was not going to do anything, Naruto released her arm. A hand then reached out and took Naruto's hand. Sasuke's voice was as grim as Naruto's when he said, Don't touch my teammate like that. Naruto recoiled and moved away from the irate Uchiha survivor. After taking the first step, Naruto halted and refused to back down. He made a valiant effort to hide the fact that he was trembling on the inside. Sasuke grinned when he noticed the fear in his eyes. Naruto was being yelled at by a tiny voice inside his head. Go after the small Uchiha. He threatened not just you but also your partner. Will you tolerate him ruining your partner? Take a deadly action. Naruto had surmised that Kyuubi was the source of the tiny voice, which was filled with thousands of years of rage and hatred. He heard the voice, but in his mind a louder voice shouted. Don't. There's no reason to fight. Don't start anything because he won't ruin you or Hinata. This voice bewildered Naruto, saying, when he lets go, just walk away with your team. Although he wanted to follow the other voice's wishes, he also agreed with the voice. When Sasuke released him, he finally heeded the advice of the louder voice. Hinata yelled, Back off Uchiha. She detested the hateful and malicious way that Sasuke and the entire village looked at Naruto. It didn't help that he was only a foot away either. Seems like losers have to stick together. If not them, then who will? Sakura yelled, Yeah. At Team 8. Kiba merely laughed. His enjoyment was cut short when Hinata gave him a death glare. Sasuke was shocked and simply glared at Naruto. Naruto's eyes went from blue to a reddish green hue and back again. Sasuke simply walked away after shaking his head. Naturally, Sakura trailed behind him, and Kiba accompanied his team since he realized he was no longer welcome with Team 8. Come on, let's eat, Hinata exclaimed with a smile, as though the previous incident had never occurred. After Naruto gave a nod, Team 8 entered Ichiraku's to have lunch. As Team 8 entered the ramen shop, a lone figure in the distance watched. The blonde wearing blue, white, and black attire caught his attention. His Jujutsu watched curiously as its green eyes spun. The lone figure vanished in a whirl of leaves, saying, One day, you'll find out who you really are. And when that day comes, I'll be there but for now. His voice sounded like a wind whisper. There's a test you'll need to pass. Naruto was shocked when Hinata yelled, See ya later Naruto.kun, as she entered her home. Hinata had asked Naruto if he could walk her home after Team 8 had finished their ramen. They walked to the Hyuga mansion after bidding Shino farewell. While traveling there, Hinata asked Naruto what he believed the test would cover. They arrived at Hinata's house after a few guesses and giggles. Hinata rushed into her house and gave Naruto a last-minute peck on the cheek. Shaking it off, Naruto considered the implications. This might indicate that she likes me. However, I don't believe so. I think she was just saying thank you. Naruto put his right hand over his heart and said, I shouldn't make too much of it. So, why am I experiencing this pain? Naruto looked in the direction of the woodland. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw someone. He continued to walk home in the hopes of getting a long shower and going to bed. Naruto's eyes abruptly turned green, and a swirl that started in the pupil and ended at the sclera was visible. He surveyed his surroundings, wondering how his dujutsu had been used against his will. Everything has stopped moving, including people, insects, birds, and leaves in the air, he noticed as he looked around. They simply floated, motionless, and hung in midair. Naruto had no idea what was going on, but he was determined to learn. Leaping to the roof of a nearby building, he began searching for a suspicious object. He was perplexed by what he saw, so it didn't take him long to notice anything. He saw something that resembled a green dome encircling him by roughly 50 feet. Naruto has seen this before. He could accomplish it, but not to this extent. The largest he was able to make had a radius of roughly 10 feet. Behind Naruto, a voice said, "So you noticed?" When he turned around, he saw a man with blonde hair who was filthy and wearing a cloak. He had a rough, passive face. When he saw Naruto's dujutsu in action, he grinned. "Who are you?" Naruto inquired, apprehensive of the unfamiliar person. The stranger never stopped smiling. The stranger startled Naruto by saying, "So you activated the Jikokugen, have you? That's quite impressive for someone so young and inexperienced with it." Jikokugen? The stranger tilted his head, his smile fading. Infuriating the stranger, Naruto shook his head and said, "You mean you didn't know? The Jikokugen is called the Time Eye. It's a very rare dujutsu, only found in members of a certain clan. Do you know which clan? Those old fools didn't tell you of your origin? Bastards. At any rate, you, Uzumaki Naruto, belong to a very elite clan, one that deals assassinations and infiltration missions. This eye of ours lets us control time, even if it is for a couple of seconds to a couple of hours. The key is to be able to have perfect chakra control." Naruto was recording everything the man had just said, he just wasn't buying it. Wanting to know everything, Naruto questioned, I'm part of a clan. Which one? And how is this clan able to control time with our eyes?" Before responding, the stranger let out a sigh. "Yes, you belong to a clan. I thought I told you. I can't answer the second question because no one told you yet and my brother would probably kill me. As for how our clan is able to control time, there is a myth about how we got our dujutsu. It is said that a mysterious woman ran into one of our ancestors while she was fleeing from a mob that was pursuing her. Our ancestor kindly offered her a place to hide in his house, and once the mob had left, they became acquainted. A week later, she was about to leave, but our ancestor stopped her, telling her he had fallen in love with this woman. The woman stayed with him despite being unsure of what to do because she was a nomad and could not remain in one spot for very long. Only a year later, we heard the cries of a baby as our ancestor held both his and the unidentified woman's child. Our ancestor was left alone with a green-eyed baby after the enigmatic woman ran away after giving birth. Some generations have since acquired what we have called the Jikokugen, and some have even attained new heights of it. However, there are now only 2 people with this power left on Earth, me, as well as you. But how did the rest of the clan fare? People were afraid of the power because time is a powerful thing and controlling it is even more powerful. Although we could have used our dujutsu to take over the world, many were afraid that we wouldn't want to achieve such a high level of power. To determine the future of the Jikokugen in our clan, the 5 cages met in secret one day. Like the Hyugas due to the members of the branch family, some wanted to seal us. Others continued to try to win our loyalty, but we would never do that. When it was finally decided to stop the arguments, one person argued that we should be eliminated for the benefit of all. In their wisdom, these cages concurred. Every member, from young children to the elderly, was killed by the cage's hunter nins the following night. Nobody was spared. It was too much for Naruto to process, and he wasn't sure how much of what he was hearing to believe. How do we still have the Jikokugen if that's the case? Because after the mysterious woman gave birth to her first child, she had our ancestor's second child in her, though she didn't find out until her stomach started to show. Wait, that still doesn't explain how we control time. That isn't really something you should be worrying about. The older man sighed once more. No one really knows, not even I. You should concentrate on strengthening yourself to meet the challenges that lie ahead in a few years. You will have to deal with a very distant relative, and this will decide whether or not everyone close to you survives. You must improve, you must become stronger. The man cautioned, but only if you want to save those close to you. Naruto wished his life wasn't so complicated, but he wouldn't be considered a fool for not following the man's advice, even if he didn't understand everything he had to say. The man threw an ancient-looking scroll at Naruto, who caught it and examined it with interest. He looked up to ask the man another question, but he and the dome were gone, and he searched the area but could not find the man. You're going to need this if you want to master the Jikokugen, the man said. He returned his focus to the scroll he was holding, put it in his pockets, and went home while repeatedly repeating what the man had said to him. The man grinned as he watched from a distance. "Good luck, Naruto, you're going to need it." Still a little anxious, Naruto made his way to the designated training ground. Kurenai had warned him about the test that new genin must take to prove they're good enough to be called ninjas, but she didn't explain exactly what they needed to do to pass. He now wished she had. He sighed when he saw that he was the first person there, and he dared not do anything strenuous because it might drain valuable energy from him before this mysterious test. The only sensible thing to do was to meditate to calm his nerves. Naruto woke up in a sewer, like place deep in his subconscious, with water flooded up to his shins. He looked around the halls into different rooms, one of which contained a memory of when he was being beaten and losing consciousness. It replayed from the beginning and repeated again when it was over, and he couldn't take it any longer. He turned away and saw in another room the time he went to a store and was sold spoiled food and overcharged for it. He continued passing most of the rooms because most of them contained unpleasant memories he wanted to forget. He only had pleasant memories of a few rooms, including the first time he met Hinata. Flashback. When he saw Hinata drooling over her textbook during one of Iruka's lengthy lectures, he looked up to make sure she wasn't paying any attention to him. He then prodded Hinata to try to wake her up, but she only stirred briefly before falling back asleep. He prodded her a little harder, but she didn't wake up. After running out of ideas, Naruto tried one last thing, hoping it wouldn't upset her, and she began rubbing Hinata's ribs with the tips of his fingers. Hinata smiled and began to giggle, realizing that he needed to tickle her more to get her to wake up, so he did just that. Her laughter filled the room. Naruto stopped and his face turned dark red. He didn't really want to stop, but he went a bit too far with the tickling. Hinata's laughter subsided, and she glanced at him with a faint smile before remembering what she had done. Iruka looked at her and Naruto, and he looked at her with his eyebrow raised. It appears that a punishment is necessary because neither of you seems to be listening. Hinata pouted and Naruto felt bad for putting Hinata in trouble when Iruka told them, "You two will stay after school and clean this classroom until it's spotless." Naruto was regrettably sweeping after class when Hinata went into the classroom closet to get something to clean the windows. Naruto was contemplating whether or not to apologize while she was inside, but when she came out, he gave in, at least to show her that he didn't mean to get her into trouble, even though he knew she would likely be upset and yell at him because that's what everyone did, so why not her? Hinata. Hinata halted her stroll and gave him a questioning glance. She had never heard him speak, or at least not very often, so it was intriguing to see what prompted him to do so. Yes. Because he was nervous. Naruto let go of the broom and it fell to the ground, but he gulped loudly and rubbed the back of his head. When the sound of the broom hitting the floor filled the room, Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin. Hinata cleared her throat and giggled so as not to offend him. Hinata tilted her head and looked at Naruto, who blushed, saying, Well, I wanted to apologize for making you stay after school." He didn't really understand why she made him feel this way, but it wasn't like he didn't like it. "It's okay. This isn't nearly as boring as the dull family tasks I had to complete when I got home. Why did you tickle me, by the way?" Naruto kept rubbing his head as she asked, placing the cloth and spray on the closest table. Well, I hoped you wouldn't run afoul of Iruka. Sensei. Hinata covered her mouth and laughed as Naruto said sheepishly, but it looked like tea. That failed. Hinata closed her eyes and grinned as she said, "Thanks for the help, but try something else next time." Naruto nodded his head, and Hinata picked up the cloth and spray. Really? I can clean this by myself, so it's okay." As Naruto approached to remove the items from Hinata's grasp, she retreated and placed them behind her back. "You can go home if you want," Naruto said. "Don't stress over it. I've already promised to do nothing exciting when I get home. I'll give it back to you because you did me a favor," Hinata said. However, it's my fault, not yours." Naruto started to say, "It's my fault you're here," but she interrupted him by putting her finger to his lips. "I told you it was okay, so come on. You could reward me with some food after we're done cleaning the room if you want to make it up to me." Naruto blushed again and gave a stupid nod, to which Hinata replied, "Between friends." Hinata turned around and blushed, saying, "Great, so hurry up because I'm starving." Naruto didn't notice her blush, but he kept his eyes on her, shaking his thoughts from his mind and continuing to sweep the room. End of flashback. With a smile on his face and a sense of being prodded, Naruto opened one eye to see a worried looking Kurenai, a curious Hinata peering over Kurenai's shoulder, and the always passive Shino standing beside his female teammate. He then turned to face his team, one by one. "Well." Kurenai sighed, Hinata grinned, and Naruto said, "Hello." "Naruto, what were you doing?" Kurenai asked. "You looked dead and you weren't even breathing for a while." Naruto stared at her for a long moment before shrugging, and Kurenai straightened up and turned to face her first and new genin team. She was told she could administer the standard test, the old bell test, and one she had taken as a fresh genin, but she didn't like the idea. She asked if she could do something different, and the third Hokage agreed after some haggling. She smiled at her test and hoped it would work. "Anyway, how about we begin our test now that everyone is present?" and went on without waiting for her new subordinates to respond. As she proceeded deeper into the forest, Kurenai commanded, "Good, follow me." Naruto trailed behind her, with Hinata and Shino falling into step behind him. They continued walking for approximately 5 minutes before Kurenai stopped, at which point everyone stopped and turned to face their sensei. "All right, this is sufficient. The test will be straightforward now. You three just need to pick up a basic package and scroll from a market 5 miles to the west. They will give it to you after you explain that you have come to retrieve it for me, Yuhi Kurenai, and you will then return to the assigned training location. The catch. Time is of the essence. Before noon, which is in roughly 6 hours, you must retrieve the package and deliver it back to me, so act quickly." After a brief silence, Naruto, Hinata, and Shino sprang into action and ran through the forest to reach the market in time. "Are you aware of your destination, Naruto-kun?" After running for approximately 4 miles, they decided to stop for a water break at a small waterfall. The water there was clean and actually appeared cleaner than the water that comes out of Naruto's sink. Naruto and Shino cupped some water in their hands and drank it after Hinata asked. Naruto nodded. After getting her fill, Hinata lifted her head out of the water and shook her head, attempting to remove as much water as possible from her head. In contrast, Hinata dipped her entire head into the water, not really caring that her long hair would get wet. Naruto blushed in embarrassment. He was caught staring at Hinata, and even though he knew Shino wouldn't make fun of him, he didn't necessarily want to see every embarrassing moment. He couldn't stop staring at her. She looked so adorable while he shook her head. He snapped out of it, ducking his head, and looking at Shino with an eyebrow raised. Away from the rest of his team, Naruto stood and walked beneath a nearby tree, leaning against it as he watched Hinata plunge her entire head into the water once more. Shino had finished his fill of water and was standing next to Naruto in the shade of a tree, but Naruto couldn't take his eyes off of her. There was something about her that drew him in. She was kind, sincere, and flawless in every way. Yes, her vocabulary and demeanor were extremely odd for someone of her background, but Naruto didn't care. Naruto turned to see Shino leaning against the tree to his left, but he couldn't tell if he was sleeping or just thinking, and he wasn't going to find out because Hinata was approaching them. "How are you all doing?" Shino nodded his head in response to her question. Naruto replied, "Yeah, I'm good." Hinata raised her head to observe the sun's position. "We appear to have just under 4 hours left to retrieve the scroll," Hinata confidently remarked. "At this rate, we'll pass our little test in no time." Naruto nodded, and he and Shino followed as Hinata resumed her run. When they finally reached the small market, they all cheered inwardly and went inside. They saw a variety of items in the shop, including ninja weapons, an empty scroll, sake, and other necessities. Naruto, who was the unofficial leader, approached the counter and saw an elderly man sitting behind it. He had gray hair and beard, tattered clothing, and a small patch on his left eye. He looked at Naruto and grinned. "Hello there," said the old man. "What can I do for you?" in a somber voice from years of smoking. The old man stood with a constant smile on his face as Naruto humbly explained, "Well, we came to pick up a package for our sensei. Her name's Yuhi Kurenai." Obviously, naturally. Naruto nodded and watched as the elderly man went to retrieve the package, and after waiting for approximately 5 minutes, he returned with a small box with a small scroll tied to the side, and a sticker on top of the box that contained Kurenai's name and basic living details. As he reached for the box, Naruto said, "Thank you." However, the elderly man held on to the box. "This is a very important package that needs to get to Yuhi-san immediately, so I'm warning you, kid. No peeking, no distractions." The elderly man waved and grinned as he released the box, and Naruto removed it from the counter. "Just take it, hand it to her, and that's it." The old man calmly told them, "Now move along. Bandits might come and take this away from you." Hinata arched an eyebrow. "How about you, though? What if they continue to believe you possess it?" she inquired. "Don't worry, I have Akio if I have any problems." A large man, about 25 years old and about 6 feet tall, with the body of a brick wall, entered the room, looked at the Kurenai team, and then bowed to the elderly man. "Dad, did you call?" The elderly man shook his head when Akio asked. No, I didn't, but while you're here, how about getting your dad a nice cup of tea? The old man glanced at the Kurenai team and waved his hand before Akio nodded and walked out of the room. The team Kurenai left the small shop after he said, "Now go." The old man sighed and wiped the perspiration that was starting to form on his forehead after he was certain they were out of earshot. Good, let's go before we lose them. Two shadows leapt from the ceiling and bowed before the elderly man. I thought they'd never leave. Keep in mind that our goal is to frighten them into dropping the package and fleeing, not to kill them. Have you got that? The old man coughed and fanned the area in front of him, while the other shadow simply nodded and puffed his cigarette. One of the shadows nodded enthusiastically. As the old man and the shadows vanished, he remarked, "If you keep smoking that cheap crap while I'm around, I might not make it to be this old." After a mile of running, Naruto stopped at the same clearing where they had a drink of water, and his teammates jumped down right behind him, wondering why he had stopped. Naruto was observing the trees surrounding the clearing when he activated the Jikokugen, forming a dome around himself and his teammates, and he turned around to see 7 shuriken aimed at Hinata and Shino. He grabbed the shuriken and threw them back in the direction they had come from, and he heard rustling coming from the tree and 5 shadows leaping off the trees. The majority of the shadows wore dark green cloaks with hoods that covered their faces. The leader, Naruto assumed, wore a midnight blue cloak with the hood down, not bothering to hide his rough face, which included a horizontal scar through his chin and a scar down his left cheek. He chewed on a toothpick. His eyes were light brown. He grinned arrogantly as he glanced up and down at Naruto. "So, you're among the last people left alive?" With a glance at Hinata's frozen form, the man said, "You don't look so tough, in fact." As he moved closer to Team Kurenai. "The girl looks stronger than you." Naruto hesitated for a moment before lowering himself into his stance. "She will most likely grow up to be a pretty good person in a few years." The man said, "You know what, after we kill you and the other guy, we might just take the girl." Naruto's eyes widened and his heart raced as they threatened to take Hinata. He was unfazed by his threat to kill him because it was a common occurrence in his life. However, Naruto had never been more terrified in his life when this man threatened to kidnap Hinata. He also felt furious. His eyes turned a deep red, and he could feel the fangs and claws growing, and his whisker marks deepening, and he felt more anger and hatred for the man in front of him than he had ever felt for a single man. He was aware that the Kyuubi was most likely attempting to seize control. He had previously refused the Kyuubi's attempts to persuade him to use his power, but in this particular circumstance, it was alluring. Then he thought about his 2 teammates. How would they feel about him if they witnessed him being consumed by evil and a great deal of chakra? Naruto took a deep breath and began to calm himself, making his claws and fangs retract and his whiskers thin slightly but not completely. His eyes remained the same, filled with pure malice, and he took off the dome before turning his head to face his teammates. As Hinata and Shino turned around in shock, Naruto said softly enough that only his teammates could hear him. "Hinata, Shino, before you freak out, listen to me." It seemed like only a second had gone by when Naruto appeared behind them, with 5 other people in the clearing. Hinata would have likely asked why, but Naruto had beaten her to it. "We must leave this place and make our way to the village. These men are extremely dangerous and have the potential to kill us." The 2 in the center and the man in the blue cloak are roughly Chunin level. Slightly above Chunin are the ones on the side. "We will die if we continue to fight. You understand that we run directly toward the village on my mark, without stopping for anything?" Shino and Hinata both nodded. "Hey, why are all 3 of you nodding?" Naruto made a few quick hand signals before stopping at the horse sign as the leader yelled. After taking a deep breath and putting his hand next to his mouth, he thought, "I hope this works." Now, Raging Waves Jutsu is the water style. Hinata and Shino had leapt up to the trees and watched as more water poured out of Naruto's mouth as a stream of water engulfed the 5 ninjas. As the jutsu came to an end, Naruto thought, "What are they still doing here?" He leapt to the trees and jumped into his teammates. As he and his group made their way to Konoha, Naruto remarked, "Come on, I thought I told you to run. I wanted to wait for you, but Shino said we should have. We won't abandon you because you are a member of this team," Hinata stated resolutely. "For myself? Are you serious? You could always get someone to replace me, so I'm not worth dying over. All I am is a nobody." The fact that Naruto simply called himself expendable astounded Hinata and Shino, who exchanged glances before turning to face him. The jutsu he used to divert the 5 ninjas was extremely difficult to learn and consumed the majority of the user's chakra, but Naruto didn't even perspire. The mysterious ninja leader and the 2 Naruto had recognized as Chunin appeared up ahead of them before Hinata could speak, stopping 2 trees in front of them and watching the unidentified men with caution. Naruto leapt on a branch higher than the other ninjas and made a one-hand sign, crossing his middle and index fingers on both hands and yelling, "Jutsu no Bushin Taju Kage." The field was encircled by more than 50 Naruto, who began to make more hand signals. Henge. Team Kurenai moved around the three ninjas and the clones, walking silently for a few minutes before running full speed and heading for Konoha. Suddenly, a third of the group were Hinata's, another third were Shino's, and the final third were Naruto's. They then all dispersed, jumping from place to place and leaving the place in chaos. The three ninjas stabbed some of the clones, dispersing them and allowing some of the smoke to obscure their vision. "Are you familiar with those guys, Naruto-kun?" Naruto shook his head in response to Hinata's question. "They seem to be pursuing the package and scroll that we are meant to deliver to Kurenai. Sensei." Hinata nodded, and Naruto did nothing but run and jump from tree to tree. "That seems to be the only logical reason to be after us unless they are after one of us specifically," Shino said. "All right. I believe. They are pursuing me. I don't know why exactly, but I seem to be their target." Naruto only partially told the truth. It wasn't a total lie. "Are you aware of why?" Hinata inquired. When Naruto said, "Now isn't the time to be talking about this," Hinata stopped running and folded her arms across her chest, and both Shino and Naruto stopped as well. "Why did you stop, Hinata?" With a sigh, Naruto took Hinata by the left arm and said, "Tell me why they're after you or I'll wait here and ask them myself." Hinata nodded, and Team Kurenai resumed their run. "Okay, but we have to keep moving forward. I can run and explain at the same time." "All right, so, according to what I've been told, it's called the Jikokugen. The time Naruto said hesitantly, "I didn't tell anyone this but I have a dujutsu." Hinata's eyes widened, and Shino simply raised both eyebrows. "I am able to construct a 20-foot diameter dome in which time stops. It also has the ability to read chakras, which allows me to determine a person's level of power. It's really intricate, and I'm still not proficient enough to fully utilize it." After overcoming her initial shock, Hinata remarked, I've never heard of the Jikokugen. I'm not shocked, because the 5 Kages believed they would eventually overrule everyone. The clan that possessed the Jikokugen was destroyed a long time ago." Naruto said, "I don't know who they are, but I think they're here to finish the job." He turned to face Shino, who was incredibly silent about this new information, too quiet, actually. Before anyone could blink, a powerful wind began to blow around them, sending them all flying into the air. Hinata grabbed Shino's arm and reached for Naruto's, but Naruto was blown back and deeper into the forest by the wind. "Something's wrong," Naruto said. Naruto-kun. The leader of the 4 enigmatic ninjas leapt out of his hiding place as his subordinates materialized in front of him, and Hinata screamed as she and Shino were flung in the opposite direction. The leader took a deep breath and his body flitted to where Naruto was. "You 4 deal with the other 2, I'll deal with the last Namikaze." The 4 ninjas nodded and vanished in a whirl of leaves. He woke up slowly, sat up groggily, and looked around, remembering that he had never slept before, especially in the forest. When he remembered the ambush, his eyes snapped open, and he jumped up and assumed his stance, cautiously searching for someone while waiting for something to happen. "Calm down, I'm just here to chat." Naruto spun on his heels and braced himself when a voice reverberated through the trees surrounding him. The ninja leader then casually emerged from behind a tree and entered the clearing. "Who are you? And what are you looking for?" Naruto inquired. With his arms folded across his chest, Hiroshi declared, "I am Hiroshi and what I want is your death." "What have I done to you? Is the fox the reason you're upset with me?" Hiroshi chuckled at Naruto as he repeated his question. "The fox could rot in hell and I wouldn't give a damn. No, it's not that I want you dead, but rather the unique power you possess." "The Jikokugen," the man replied, emphasizing Jikokugen a bit. "You see, the 5 Kages met a long time ago with the goal of destroying your clan and the Jikokugen's power. To do this, both my father and my grandfather departed. One of your clan members happened to spot my father during the annihilation and killed him." With every word, Hiroshi's rage grew. "My grandfather killed himself days after the incident, leaving my mother alone while I lay in her womb. I spent more than 40 years growing up without a father, and it's all the fault of your dumb clan. I discovered that there was still one survivor after initially thinking that all Jikokugen users had died." "You?" angrily, Hiroshi said. "I'm sorry you didn't have a father, but I didn't cause his passing. I wasn't even born at the time of this. I'm not to blame for this." Naruto warned Hiroshi, "You shouldn't even try to kill me, let alone my friends." "I apologize, but it's too late," Hiroshi remarked, "they won't bring my father back." In an attempt to persuade Hiroshi, Naruto said, Killing me and my friends won't bring him back either. However, Hiroshi simply shook his head. But it'll get back at him. As he began to make hand gestures, Hiroshi shouted, "Fire style! Dragon Flame Bomb Jutsu!" Hiroshi's mouth exploded in a huge burst of flame that was directly aimed at Naruto, who had just finished one of his own series. Raging Waves Jutsu is the water style. In the center, a stream of water the size of Hiroshi's jutsu met it. The two jutsus cancelled each other out, causing steam to fill the clearing and conceal Hiroshi from Naruto's view. In an attempt to locate Hiroshi, Naruto closed his eyes and used his other senses. He opened his eyes and leapt into the air as kunai and shuriken sank into the ground where he was. He then flipped back in midair and landed on a tree trunk. When the steam subsided and it became evident that Hiroshi had not moved from his previous position, Naruto leapt from the tree he was in and turned to face him. "Your friends ought to be dead by now, you know. The ninjas I brought with me were trained by me. However, I might be lying. I did say to leave the girl alive." Naruto clenched his teeth inadvertently. "My village will benefit greatly from her as a breeding tool. We'll make sure she's taken care of when she reaches a certain age." Hiroshi sneered, "In the comfort of my home." Naruto tried to relax again, but his teeth tightened as his claws and fangs grew. Hiroshi's voice cut Naruto off in mid-sentence. "Easy now, this is exactly what he wants. What I need to do is try to ditch this guy and regroup with Hinata, Chan and Shi." The final straw was when Hiroshi said, "It's too bad you won't be alive long enough to hear her scream my name during the night." Naruto's eyes turned green as he activated his dojutsu, but then they turned completely yellow, glowing a little with a black slit where the pupil normally is and a swirl formed around the slit pupil. His whiskers thickened and his hair became wilder, his back hunched back, and he went on all fours, growling and snarling at Hiroshi. "Get mad, that's it. Hate me, attack me, and feed off your hatred," Hiroshi screamed, and Naruto sprang into action, slashing him with his claws. Hiroshi managed to avoid the first two blows, but his left arm was severely slashed. He gave a brief cry of pain before grinning once more. "Nice shot, but if you want to prevent me from taking your whore, you'll need to do more. Stop talking," he roared, sending Hiroshi back into a tree, but before he hit the tree, he flipped back and landed on his feet, then he leapt off the tree and went back to where he had been standing. A red shroud of chakra engulfed Naruto, causing 2 bumps on his head and 1 on his back, giving him fox-like ears and a tail. Now we're talking. When Hinata awoke, the 4 cloaked ninjas she and her team had encountered earlier were all around her. She got to her feet and assumed her family's fighting position. She noticed that the cloaked ninjas were waiting for her to initiate the battle and that Shino was still unconscious. Hinata would have, of course, continued to fight until she was unable to do so. However, she now had to be concerned about her teammates' safety in addition to her own. After considering her options, she decided to simply wait for them to initiate contact. Impatient, one of the cloaked ninja attempted to attack Hinata, not anticipating that she would bend back at an impossible angle and cut off the chakra points on his left arm. That ninja glared at Hinata, or she believed he did, while holding his left arm, which was now limp at his side. Hinata sidestepped another cloaked ninja's tackle and spun on her heels. Where there had previously only been sclera, the cloaked ninjas suddenly noticed veins emerging close to her eyes and the outline of her pupil. As he spoke, Hinata heard the tallest ninja sneer. The tallest ninja nodded his head in Shino's direction and said, "So you two are tainted with a dojutsu. It's a shame really. I guess now we have no choice but to exterminate you." When Hinata noticed that one of the ninjas was running toward Shino, she rushed to his side to protect him. When the ninja was within range, she reared her palm back and launched it. When the ninja quickly shifted to the left, avoiding the attack entirely, and kneed her in the stomach, her eyes widened in surprise. She rolled out of danger, barely escaping the chop to her neck as she fell to her knees and coughed up some blood. Panting and having some difficulty breathing, she got up as quickly as she could and returned to Shino's side. As he got ready to attack again, the ninja who had attacked her laughed. He rushed forward and threw his fist, but Hinata surprised everyone in the clearing by kicking him in the sternum and slapping his hand away. Sadly, she did not have enough time to incorporate chakra into her kick, so the ninja only received a straightforward sternum kick and no internal injuries. Hinata muttered a curse and pondered how she would escape the situation unscathed. Then, still facing the enemy ninja, she heard Shino stirring and retreated towards him. She leaned down to speak to Shino in a whisper. "You okay?" she asked, catching him nodding out of the corner of her eye. "Good, now look, we are outclassed and I doubt we'd last even a minute if these guys decided to get serious. What do you think we should do?" he replied. "Right now would not be a good idea to fight. We are not prepared and have little to no experience when it comes to an actual fight. In my opinion, the best course of action is to confuse them long enough for the two of us to head back to Konoha and alert a Junin. Hinata nodded her head. Shino shook his head this time, saying, "We can't do that. We have to find Naruto-kun first, then go back to Konoha." "We can't do that either. Do you think it is smart of us to go off to find him with these 4 ninjas plus the other one after us? The logical thing to do is to go to Konoha and let the adults handle this. Besides, do you think Naruto would like us risking our life just to save him? I know he's our teammate and I want to save him too, but no good would come from trying to save him while we have our own issues to deal with." Shino clarified. After a moment of hesitation, Hinata nodded her head. After saying, "I'm getting tired of waiting," a ninja in a cloak attacked Shino and Hinata. He was unable to evade Shino's attack due to his lack of speed. Suddenly, there were bugs all over the cloaked ninja. As the cloaked ninja fell to his knees and then forward, hitting the ground and losing consciousness, Shino remarked, "It seems you didn't see my Kakaichu bugs while you attacked me and my teammate. It is a shame that you won't be conscious long enough to regret your decision." Hinata exhaled in relief and appreciation. At least they didn't have to worry about another ninja. She then sensed a presence behind her, but before she could blink, a forceful kick struck her from behind. Shino was also struck and flew in Hinata's opposite direction because he lacked the reflexes to respond to the ninja behind him. He skidded on the ground when he landed and then stopped completely. He noticed Hinata straining to sit up when he looked up. Shino suspected that his ribs were cracked because he felt pain around them. He saw an enraged ninja with his hood down and his eyes blazing when he turned to face the place where he had been. The ninja's eyes were green and their hair was brown. Wondering who to hit first, he glanced between Shino and Hinata. Shino stood up to stop him, but he was kicked in the ribs again, breaking them further and making him cough up blood. He then settled on Hinata and charged. Above him, a second ninja in a cloak stood haughtily. "I should end you just for mocking the name ninja." The cloaked ninja pulled out a kunai and twirled it in his hand. Such a sad sight when kids who play ninja try to stand up to actual ninjas. Later on, Shino would claim to have heard a loud chirping sound before a hand suddenly emerged from the ninja's chest. The ninja had a glove and electricity on the hand sticking out of his torso. Then the ninja collapsed to the ground, motionless and lifeless, and his eyes closed. Startled, Shino looked up to see a Junin with his hite-dot-eyed over one eye, a dark mask over his mouth, and a gray broom for hair. Kakashi grinned as he looked down. "You okay, Shino?" Shino could only nod his head, still in shock over his first death. Unaware that Kakashi had arrived with a kunai in hand, prepared to kill Hinata, the cloaked ninja yelled, "You'll die by my hands, girl." As he charged at her, unconsciously, Hinata pulled out a kunai and hurled it at the ninja, deflecting it with his own to slow but not stop him. When Hinata closed her eyes and waited for the pain, she heard someone gurgling, as if they were trying to spit out water, but she didn't feel any pain. When she opened her eyes, she saw the attacking ninja clutch his neck in a futile attempt to halt the bleeding, and she gasped. When Hinata looked up, she saw a smoking Junin and asked, "Hey, are you alright there?" This Junin, who had scruffy facial hair, gazed apathetically at the ninja who were dying. Before dropping his cigarette to the ground and extinguishing it with his foot, he took one final puff. Then Hinata stammered, "Why?" "Yeah." Asuma saw her stutter and turned to face her. She was clearly trembling, which he assumed was due to the fact that she had witnessed her first death. He let out a sigh and shook his trench knives to get rid of the blood from the enemy. When 2 Junins entered the battle, the final ninja became alarmed. He made the decision to back off, but he ran into someone and was stopped. He was punched in the face and sent flying across the clearing before the ninja could take action. The ninja was rendered unconscious after colliding head first with a tree. Upon entering the clearing, Guy exclaimed, "Yash, the flames of youth still burn brightly in all of us." Kakashi gave him a languid glance. The lazy Junin said casually, Did you say something, Guy?" And Guy collapsed to the ground, face down. Guy complained, "Ah, Kakashi, why do you have to act so cool?" But Kakashi chose to ignore him. He searched the area but found nothing, at least not what he was looking for. Hinata's eyes grew wide, and she got to her feet, asking, "Where's Naruto? Isn't he part of your group?" As she triggered her Byakugan, everyone's eyes were on her. Despite her obvious pain, she continued to use her Dujutsu despite her right eye squinting. She searched for a minute before giving up and running into the forest. As Kakashi ordered Guy, Asuma and Kakashi pursued her. Guy nodded and picked up Shino gently, saying, "Guy, take him and get him to a hospital. He could be seriously injured, so be careful with him." Then, without causing harm to Shino, he made his way as fast as he could to the hospital. Naruto could sense the corrupted chakra coursing through him and Kyuubi's chakra still enveloping him. Naruto was ashamed of himself for succumbing to temptation, but he understood that it was unavoidable because he was only human and had made his share of errors. But as he ducked under another fireball from Hiroshi, he thought, I'm barely human anymore. Naruto thought it strange that the battle wasn't finished yet, so he had to act quickly. Hiroshi, however, appeared unaffected by his dujutsu. Normally, when his Jikokugen was active, he would stop time and simply beat down his opponent without exerting much effort. But that's impossible. Hiroshi chuckled as he saw Naruto's perplexed look. Naruto watched as Hiroshi produced a necklace with a tiny glowing rock attached. Wondering why your precious Jikokugen isn't affecting me? Well, it's pretty easy to answer. It is because of this, she said. Although Naruto didn't fully comprehend it, he surmised that it was the cause of his dujutsu's failure. I'll tell you now, Namikaze, you will not beat me, not with your dujutsu anyways, and it's all thanks to this rock. You see, it is said that your eye can control time. That no one could stand a chance against your clan. But that is a lie, all of it. Your clan can't really control time, only pause people and everything in your dome. Without moving or speaking, Naruto felt his logical thoughts returning to him. He gradually reclaimed Kyuubi's chakra. From referring to him as Namikaze to his dujutsu being a lie, Naruto wasn't sure if anything the man said was accurate given that he was an enemy ninja. Naruto stumbled. What do you mean? Hiroshi merely grinned. You see, no man has control over time. It is impossible to grasp time, much less control it. People seem to ignore this and believe that your clan has control over time, regardless of how many times others have denied it. I didn't really believe that your clan had control over time. It is a ridiculous and foolish claim. Therefore, when my grandfather came home after killing the last of the Namikaze clan, he told me and many others that the Namikazes have no control over time, only what occurs inside the dome they construct. As you can see, your dujutsu forms a dome that emits electrical signals throughout the entire structure. This signal is received by living things, and it seemed that your dujutsu stopped time because of the electrical disruption the dome causes to a human's brain and muscles. They thought my grandfather was crazy and made fun of him. However, when I asked my grandfather how he came to this conclusion, he explained that he saw time go on inside the dome. He said that while he was fighting, he witnessed a Namikaze use his dujutsu to stop some people in their tracks, and as he watched others being killed, he couldn't help but notice that a minute had gone by. That's what the clock told him. It appears that the dome's electrical signals are insufficient to affect anything other than the brain and muscles of humans or animals. It also uses the user's chakra to keep objects motionless. For instance, your chakra would hold a bird in place whether it was flying or moving around, while the electrical signals would stop its mind and instruct its muscles to stay motionless. So to speak, the Jikokugen's true effect is that it gives you an extreme regulation of electrical currents, meaning that you can control electricity really well, whether you're conscious of it or not. After taking in Hiroshi's words, Naruto remarked, "You still haven't explained how you are unaffected by it." With a sigh, Hiroshi replaced his necklace. This necklace is charged with negative ions, opposite to the positive ions in the electricity your dujutsu creates. It is very hard to find these kinds of rocks. It is also true for others with dujutsu. If you were to go against another dujutsu user whose level is the same or stronger than your own, they will be unaffected by the dujutsu. Those below would be rendered useless and as good as dead. After removing himself from his fighting stance, Naruto considered what he had just been told. What his enemy told him. Could he believe it? Though it didn't seem likely, he might be lying. When Hiroshi's fireball jutsu struck its target, Naruto let out a painful yelp. As the fire tormented his nerve system, Naruto could feel his clothing burning. To extinguish the flames, Naruto rolled around and fell back. In an instant, Hiroshi was on him, grabbing him by the collar and holding him at eye level. Naruto simply smirked feebly and spat in his face when he asked, "How does it feel to die at the hands of someone better than you?" How's it feel to lose to a brat like me? Hiroshi asked as the Naruto he was holding burst into a cloud of smoke and vanished from view. Naruto suddenly materialized beneath him and gave Hiroshi a powerful uppercut to the chin, sending him flying and landing hard. Despite the speed at which his burns were healing, Naruto was breathing heavily and was certain that they wouldn't heal sufficiently. Wondering how much longer he could go before his body failed him, Naruto dropped to one knee. Naruto heard Kyuubi say, "Listen, brat, use my power and I'll guarantee you and your mate's survival." Once more, Naruto paused before answering, allowing the second voice to finish speaking. No, refused to give in to Naruto. The second voice was not as loud as the first, but Naruto was still perplexed as to who it was. He will only use your body to seek revenge on Konoha. But Hinata and Shino will still be in danger if I don't put an end to this. While Kyuubi is in charge, Would you like to save her? Naruto, who was beginning to feel a headache, saw that Hiroshi appeared tired but not exhausted. You wouldn't save her, he would. In order to estimate how much chakra Hiroshi had left, Naruto briefly closed his eyes to check his own. He was aware that he would perish along with Shino and possibly Hinata if he did not act quickly. Kyuubi. Naruto sensed Kyuubi grinning. What is it, boy? Naruto raised his head, his eyes resolute. I decline. What? I refuse to use your corrupted power. I'm not going to give up, so I'll do this myself. I'll make sure that my teammates and I survive. Alone. Though he concentrated on the issue at hand, Naruto could tell that Kyuubi was unhappy with his response. Naruto quickly came up with a plan, prayed it would work, and then acted on it. 3 shadow clones were conjured by him, and they ran alongside each other. The first one leapt and kicked Hiroshi in the chest, but he punched with his left fist and blocked it with his right forearm. Additionally, the second Naruto leapt and kicked him back. Through his defenses, the third Naruto flew in and flipped back, kicking Hiroshi in the chin. Before the real Naruto caught hold of Hiroshi's feet and slammed him to the ground, he flew up a foot off the ground. A Naruto clone landed on Hiroshi's chest and began strangling him after he gasped in agony. Ignoring the pain, Hiroshi easily pushed the clone of himself, unaware of the clone's true purpose. At Naruto's pitiful attempt to break up the fight, Hiroshi stood and laughed. The clone that was pushed off of Hiroshi threw something at the original Naruto, saying, "You fool, do you really think that you can defeat me? You will die by my hands and it will happen today." When Hiroshi saw what it was, his eyes widened, and he looked to see if it was a lie. How's you get that? Naruto crushed the gleaming rock into tiny fragments after placing it beneath his foot. Naruto clarified, his eye beginning to glow. The clone was not actually trying to choke you. It was actually getting that necklace off of you. Let's see you stop me now. Naruto said this one final time before vanishing behind Hiroshi. Naruto held a kunai at Hiroshi's neck and declared, "It over." With a muttered curse, Hiroshi raised his hands to indicate to Naruto that he had given up. Naruto let out a sigh, relieved that the battle was over. His vision began to become blurry before he could knock Hiroshi out, and he had the sudden sensation that a kunai had entered his head. Suppressing the pain he felt, he collapsed and held his head. He surmised that his pain was coming from using the Jikokugen with a little chakra. Hiroshi used the opportunity to kick Naruto in the chest, sending him flying across the clearing and onto the ground, adding another injury to his list. Hiroshi gave him a contented smirk as Naruto lay on the ground, hurt and defenseless. Just as Hiroshi was about to kill him, he sensed 2 massive chakra signatures swiftly approaching his location. He gave another frown and walked away. It got worse all of a sudden, and Naruto screamed in agony. Before long, Hinata entered the clearing and made a beeline for Naruto. A few seconds later, Kakashi and Asuma also showed up and went up to Naruto. Instead of responding to her question, Naruto.kun, what's wrong? Naruto simply grunted and held his head in his hands. She inquired worriedly, Kakashi. Sensei, Asuma. Sensei, what's wrong with him? Asuma and Kakashi exchanged glances and pondered whether they could actually tell her. It could be that just ran out of chakra, and with his abnormal amount that normally run through his system, his brain must feel like it's on fire, or he was hit with a jutsu from the enemy. Whatever the reason, we need to get him to the hospital. You too, Hinata, you may be able to walk, but that doesn't mean that you are fine. Kakashi responded. Hinata only focused on the fact that they had to take Naruto to the hospital, not much else. Hinata stood up and attempted to carry Naruto, but she passed out from exhaustion and collapsed on top of Naruto's unconscious body. With a smile, Kakashi lifted Hinata. After Naruto was picked up by Asuma, the 2 Junin departed for the hospital. 2 unidentified bodies were on the ground when Naruto dashed across the field and into a clearing. When he approached the person closest to him, he saw Shino, his form motionless and blood streaming from his mouth. Immediately, Naruto retreated, and his heart began to race. It was too late. Which implies, Naruto was nearly too terrified to identify the other body when he looked at it. Nevertheless, he approached it and, upon getting close enough, noticed Hinata's dead eyes staring back at him. His eyes, which used to be bright and cheery and always helped him feel better, were now lifeless and dull. Naruto's heart completely stopped this time. Naruto leaned back, still staring into Hinata's eyes. Hinata. Naruto was searching the room for something when Hinata stormed into his room. Naruto was shocked by what he saw when he saw her. Hinata didn't fully understand what he meant when he asked, Hinata, is that really you? But she still responded. With astonishment, she said, yes Naruto.kun, it's me, Wa. Naruto got up and approached her. He placed his hand on her cheek, and the touch made them both flush. Naruto surprised her by giving her a hug and grinning broadly. Naruto was unable to continue because it hurt too much. It really is you. I thought you. Hinata didn't hear what he just said because she was still in shock. Once she recovered from her initial shock, she impulsively put her arms around Naruto and rested her head on his shoulder. They were interrupted shortly after. Behind them, they heard Kurenai say, "Ahem." Naruto and Hinata both turned to see Shino and Iruka standing behind Kurenai, who was grinning. Red in the face, Naruto and Hinata released each other. One side of the room was Hinata's, while Naruto's was the other. "I'm sorry to intrude on anything you two had going, but I need to talk to both of you, along with you Shino," Kurenai replied with a grin. Iruka couldn't help but laugh when he saw how uncomfortable Hinata and Naruto were, and Shino nodded his head. Kurenai glared at Iruka, who instantly retreated and left the group, making room for Kurenai and Shino to enter. After shutting the door, she allowed her genin to take a seat. With a firm tone and icy eyes, the Junin questioned, "So, tell me exactly what happened while you three were taking a simple test." As they took turns describing what had happened, Team 8 exchanged glances. When they got to the point where he was cut off from the rest of his team, Naruto made the decision to take command. He omitted certain details, such as the moment Kyuubi took over and Hiroshi's remarks regarding Hinata. Then, Hinata and Shino went on to share their side of the tale. Kurenai sighed and nodded when they were done. "Well, I'm glad you all survived, but you didn't necessarily pass the test." Shino stayed passive while Naruto and Hinata's faces dropped. "But it wasn't fair," returned Hinata. Shino made Kurenai consider it when he said, "Although I would normally not comment, I must agree with my teammate. Our test was interrupted by elder ninjas and thus would make the test void, wouldn't it?" Kurenai. "Sensei, why don't you just make us take a second test, at least to be fair?" Naruto replied softly. Kurenai was further prompted to reflect by this. At last, she gave a nod and got up. Naruto, Hinata, and even Shino were taken aback by what they had just heard. "Tomorrow morning, I want you all to meet me in the training spot you went to this morning. You will each fight one another in a free-for-all. The first to be defeated will be sent back to the academy and the remaining two will stay in the team. The first to lose would have to return to the academy, and they would have to fight each other." "I'm sorry sensei, but I can't do that. If I have to fight my friends so I can go on to be a genin and be on the team, then I don't want to be one," Naruto replied. Kurenai gave Naruto a curious glance. "Really? Well okay then, Hinata and Shino, tomorrow, we'll meet up and..." With a nod from Shino and a smile from Naruto, Hinata said, "Actually Kurenai. Sensei, I agree with Naruto-kun. I don't want to be on a team where we would be constantly competing with each other. Teamwork isn't built off competition but trust and confidence in each member on the team. So you three would actually go back to the academy for another year just because you're afraid that you'll ruin your friendship?" Kurenai scowled at Naruto but refused to back down, saying, "No offense Kurenai. Sensei, but you're wrong. I'm sorry to have said that Kurenai. Sensei, but it is true. While I know any one of my teammates may be able to defeat me, I am not afraid to fight either of them. I am simply stating that I don't want to be in a team where we would have to fight each other just so we can have a conflict solved," Naruto said. Kurenai smiled as Hinata and Shino nodded, asking, "Is that how you two feel as well? Then you pass." Both Shino and Hinata gave Kurenai a wide-eyed stare, or at least Hinata did. Shino merely raised his eyebrows. Hinata said, obviously perplexed, "What? Let me explain. The first test you three took was to see if you'll be able to work together while at the same time be loyal enough to not look into the package and scroll. Originally, Kakashi, Asuma and Guy were going to test your teamwork, but apparently, that backfired on me. This test however was to see how loyal you were to each other. If you had agreed to my proposition, I would have failed you without a second thought. I'm glad to see that I have picked the right candidates to become genin. Congratulations." Shino nodded his head in celebration of passing the test, and Hinata smiled. Everyone on Team 8 then observed that Naruto was much quieter than normal. Shino, Kurenai, and Hinata glanced at him and saw that he was motionless. When Hinata touched his shoulder to check on him, he fell asleep but was still fine. Kurenai laughed a little, and Hinata sighed with relief. This team is going to be fascinating. Unable to take advantage of Konoha's beautiful weather, Hinata strolled down the street. There were no clouds in the sky, and the sun was shining on everything in its path. Thoughts of Naruto cluttered her mind as she gazed up at the summer sky. Hinata remained in the room and waited for Naruto to regain consciousness after Kurenai dismissed the team. While Shino and she left, she had asked him what he had omitted from his account of what had happened when he had woken up. it didn't turn out the way she had hoped. Hinata. When Hinata looked up, she saw her father standing outside the Hyuga compound with his arms folded and his face wearing his typical stoic expression. Wondering when she had arrived at the compound, Hinata bowed. When she got back up, she noticed a particular expression on her father's face. Following her father to his office, Hinata nodded, understanding what it meant. Many members of the branch bowed as they passed, and she also maintained a stoic expression. At some, she couldn't resist smiling and breaking the expression. Her stoicism vanished as she entered Hiyoshi's office and the door closed behind them. She gave her father a hug in return, and he grinned broadly. She cried, "Hi Dad." Hiyoshi sat down on the cushion behind his desk and inquired, "How was your test today, Hinata-chan?" As she responded to his perplexing query, Hinata, who was seated on the cushion in front of it, smiled briefly before a tiny frown took its place. "We were attacked by some mysterious ninjas after Naruto.kun. We were split up for a moment, but luckily Kakashi Sensei, Asuma Sensei and Guy Sensei got there in time before me, and Shino were hurt too badly. Shino had some broken ribs, but he's fine as long as he takes it easy," Hinata responded, recalling the events in her mind. Hinata turned her head away in sorrow. "You say that 3 Junin saved you and your second teammate, but what of Naruto?" she asked. Hiyoshi glanced at his daughter and noted his actions. "He told me that the man said a couple of things about him and he attacked the man. He also said that he doesn't remember much after he lost consciousness due to a sudden pain in his head." Hiyoshi inquired, "What seems to be bothering you, Hinata-chan?" With the same sorrow in her eyes, Hinata turned back to face her father. "He wasn't telling us something. A couple of things actually. I could see that whatever it is he's hiding, it's something he's too afraid to tell me or the team." Hiyoshi wondered what Naruto was concealing as he considered what his daughter had told him. He made the decision to determine what Naruto had told her, if anything. Why were the mysterious ninjas after Naruto? Hinata paused, recalling Naruto's statement that he didn't want anyone outside of his team to be aware of his dujutsu. "Naruto told me that they were after," she said. Although Hinata was taken aback by Kurenai's lack of surprise at the news, she chose to inquire later. Hiyoshi raised his eyebrow, unsure if she was referring to Kyuubi, and said, "Sorry, father, but Naruto.kun didn't want anyone outside the team to know why." "You mean it?" inquired Hiyoshi. Hinata was startled as she looked up. Inquiring as to how her father was aware of Naruto's dujutsu, Hinata questioned, "You know about it?" Hinata's thoughtful expression made him wonder what she was thinking about. Everyone knows Hinata-chan. The third made it a law to not mention it so no one from the older generation may pass on their hatred of him to the newer generation. With a tone of amazement, she questioned, "But why would that be necessary?" Hiyoshi made the decision to inquire since he wasn't entirely certain they were discussing the same topic. "Hinata-chan, do you know what we're talking about?" Hiyoshi responded. Hinata responded as though it were the most apparent thing in the world. Naruto-kun's dujutsu. This was the last thing Hiyoshi expected to hear, and his eyes widened. Incredulous, Hiyoshi questioned, "What dujutsu?" Hinata gave her father a wary look. She questioned, "Isn't that what we were talking about?" With his back straight and his mind busy making mental notes, Hiyoshi commanded, "I was talking about. Well, it is unimportant. Now tell me more of his dujutsu." Hinata obstinately informed him, "Sorry, father. Naruto doesn't want anyone else to know." Considering what it would take to get his daughter to tell him, Hiyoshi sighed. Not really thinking of anything, he brushed his daughter aside. She added air quotes to it and said, "Okay then, but before I go father, what were you talking about when you said it?" Hiyoshi shook his head. He was genuinely opposed to being put to death. Before glancing down at the paperwork he had put off, he stated, "It's not my place to say. If you must know, ask Naruto." After giving her father another glance, Hinata bowed to him and departed to speak with Naruto at the hospital. Naruto let out a sigh as he counted the seemingly endless holes in each tile while gazing up at the hospital ceiling. Unfortunately for him, he was recounting each hole in each tile for the third time, which allowed him to demonstrate the exact number of holes in each tile. Naruto, a very quick counter, said out loud, 570, 5,390, 9,460. 4. He didn't really care if anyone heard him. The only doctor who genuinely cared about his health told him he still needed to stay in the hospital for another day before he could be released, even though he was extremely bored and wanted to leave. Still in pain, he slowly cocked his head to the side when his door was knocked on. Whispering, he replied, "It's open." He was shocked to see one of his old senseis when the door opened. Kakashi entered the room and sat on a chair close to Naruto's bed, saying, "Yo." Fortunately, he was assigned a room by himself, with only Kakashi and Naruto present, due to his status as Konoha's demon child. With a less subdued tone than Kakashi recalled, Naruto said, "Hey Kakashi. Sensei." Grinning, he tucked his orange book into his kunai pouch. Naruto didn't mind that he read the book. In fact, he didn't care if it had illustrations. What mattered to him was that Kakashi was interested in him. Even though he had some reservations about Kakashi and the other adults, he was still prepared to have some faith in Kakashi. A thoughtful expression replaced Naruto's slightly amused one as he said, "So Naruto, I'm pretty sure you're tired of retelling this whole ordeal over and over again, but I was kind of hoping that you'd tell me what really happened during your fight." His voice was low as he said, all that happened was that I fought and I lost. That's it." Kakashi gave Naruto a sardonic glance. Naruto tried to turn his head away when he saw it, but he was unable to do so. Kakashi questioned, "Are you sure?" After swallowing, Naruto managed to break eye contact. With Kakashi's full attention, Naruto started, "Well, there is one thing." What is it?" Naruto's tone was quiet and occasionally hesitant as he asked, "What was the fourth Hokage's name? And I mean full name." Kakashi cocked an eyebrow in observation of his tone. As the man's words from yesterday's fight replayed in his mind, Naruto closed his eyes and asked, "His name? Oh well, it was Namikaze Minato. Why?" His antagonist's face was sneering at him as he thought, "I'll tell you now Namikaze, you will not beat me, not with your dujutsu anyways." With a nervous smile, Naruto opened his eyes. Kakashi was a little dubious, but Naruto assured him, "No reason, I just wanted to make sure." He said, "You sure?" But Naruto simply nodded. A second knock was heard before any more questions could be asked. Naruto and Kakashi saw Hinata staring into the room as the door opened without waiting for a response. "Oh, am I interrupting?" Kakashi asked, turning back to face Naruto with a, "We're not done" expression. Kakashi stood as Naruto nodded his head docilely. As he pulled out his book, Kakashi waved suggestively and said, "Not at all Hinata, I was just leaving. Have fun you two and try not to do something I wouldn't do." While Hinata was clueless as to the strange Junin's intentions and the reason behind his orange book, Naruto flushed deeply. Then he vanished in a whirl of leaves and wind that blew out the window. The window was opened by whom? Naruto pondered in his mind. Hinata went to the chair Kakashi had just left, the one closest to Naruto, and took a seat. Hinata arched an eyebrow in curiosity as he and she exchanged glances, but Naruto soon blushed and turned away. As she cleared her throat to attract his attention, she thought, "He's shy, how cute." She grinned as he glanced up at her. She asked casually, "So Naruto-kun, how are you holding up?" She smiled as he nervously said, I've been fine. What about you?" "I've been okay I guess, though there is something that's been on my mind lately," she replied. In an attempt to assist a friend, he inquired, "Oh, what's up?" She stated bluntly, "Well, to put it simply, it's been you." Naruto's heart began to race and he flushed. He questioned, not really believing her, What? "Well you see, it's about you and your fight from yesterday. I mean, the dujutsu. I only thought there was the Sharingan and the Byakugan but now there's. What is it you called it?" she inquired. He replied, "The Jikokugan." She gave a head nod. "Exactly. I didn't know there was another dujutsu. I mean, there was the Rinnegan but the only known person to have had it was the Sage of the Six Paths. And, well, I talked to my father earlier today and we talked about you." Naruto raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Well, what did you talk about? I'm not going to lie to you Naruto-kun. I mentioned your dujutsu to my father by accident because I thought he knew. He was talking about it like he did until we realized that we were on two separate subjects. Naruto-kun, do you have another secret you're hiding from me? She asked, causing Naruto to splurge and his stuttering got worse as he angrily shook his head. Despite his best efforts to control his stutter, he told her, No, oh. Of course not. Hinata closed her eyes and shook her head. He could see the sincerity in her eyes as she looked at him and said, "I know you're lying Naruto-kun. You're not very good at it." Naruto broke eye contact and looked at his hands while considering the situation. "Please Naruto-kun, we're a team and we shouldn't keep secrets from each other. Is she someone I can truly trust?" He pondered. Naruto was forced to consider it further when she said, "Okay then, how about a compromise? I tell you one of my secrets then you'll tell me one of yours. How's that sound?" He gave it some thought and reluctantly nodded his head. With a smile on her face, Hinata considered what secret she should share with him. She revealed a secret by snapping her fingers. She saw a smile appear on Naruto's face as she told him, "When no one's looking, I scarf down every single cinnamon bun I see." I'm sorry, but everyone knows you scarf down cinnamon buns, Hinata." He laughed. For a moment, Hinata stared at the fallen crest before coming up with another secret. "Oh, well," Hinata said, checking to make sure no one was listening. When Hinata saw him nod his head, she sighed and said, "You know how in the more deserted part of the village there is graffiti on some of the buildings?" When she saw Naruto's shocked expression, she wanted to laugh, but she didn't want to offend him. "Well, I did them." She nodded her head and asked, "Why? You did those?" "Yeah, I know, it's not what you'd expected from the Hyuga heiress, but sometimes being proper gets boring." She exhaled. Although she didn't think it was a huge deal, she really didn't want anyone to know because they might interpret it as such. When Hinata realized he was about to say something else, she raised her hand. She smiled and put her hand down, waiting for Naruto to reveal his secret to her. No more questions, it's your turn." In an attempt to delay the inevitable, he said, Well, my secret is the reason why the verses village hates me." Hinata's head cocked curiously. With greater curiosity than the previous minute, she inquired, "Oh, well, what is it?" Naruto felt his hands clench, his stomach tighten, and his perspiration trickle down his forehead. He didn't want to tell Hinata about Kyuubi and make her despise him, so this was the last thing he wanted to do. Losing a close friend like Hinata was the last thing he wanted to consider. A promise is still a promise, though. Not glancing at her, he said, "Well, it's like this. You know about Kyuubi?" Unaware of its connection to this, Hinata arched an eyebrow. She gave a shoulder shrug. She questioned, more or less, "It's dead, isn't it?" When Naruto shook his head, her eyes grew wide. He witnessed Hinata's face light up as he said, Not exactly. You can't kill something like the Kyuubi. It was sealed. Inside a boy. 12 years ago." Closing his eyes, Naruto waited for Hinata to yell at him or something. Me. When nothing occurred, he opened his eyes to find Hinata with her head lowered and extremely irate. Given that Kyuubi killed some of the Hyugas who attempted to defend the village, Naruto assumed she was upset with him. I'm sorry." This made Hinata stop being angry, and when she looked up, she was shocked to see Naruto crying. Before she could say anything, Naruto disappeared and her eye turned a dull green. Before it finally hit her, Hinata blinked in bewilderment. "He thinks I'm mad at him." She slammed her hand on a nearby nightstand, her anger returning. "This village lacks knowledge. It's unbelievable that this is the reason they despise him. Yes, it really irritates me." She made an effort to calm down because becoming angry would not help in any way. She got up and made her way to the door. It opened on its own before she could open it, and a nurse entered. She sighed in relief, confused but not angry by Naruto's disappearance, and she was totally unaware of Hinata in front of her. Still loud enough for Hinata to hear, she told herself, "At least I don't have to take care of that demon." With a quick chop to the nurse's neck, Hinata unconsciously punched her in the stomach, knocking her unconscious. With a triumphant sneer, Hinata walked out of the room to find Naruto. While she was leaving, she muttered, "Ignorant people, I swear." The following day, as he waited for his team to get together for some practice and the D-ranked missions Kurenai had promised, Naruto shifted around restlessly. He wanted to die and leave everyone in peace, but he was anxious and didn't really want to be there. He believed that he could no longer be a member of the team because Hinata now detested him. If one person hated another, how could a team work? Given that Hinata was the second person to arrive at the team meeting, it appears that not only did the village despise him, but fate and destiny did as well. Never mind anything off the grown, Naruto couldn't even look at her. He maintained a downward gaze and the most stoic expression he could manage, which wasn't much. Hinata approached Naruto and gave him a quick tap on the shoulder. For a moment, he glanced up, then looked down again. In a low voice, he said, "Oh, hey Hinata, I'm guessing why. You're here to tell me that you hate me now?" She sat down and gazed at the morning sky after saying to him, "Nope, not at all. I just wanted to ask why you ran off like you did." Too shocked to speak, Naruto sat beside her. She gave Naruto a smile that made his heart race, saying, I wasn't mad at you, just at the village. I think it's a stupid reason to hate you. If you were a jerk, then maybe, but that's not the case." Naruto grinned slightly, relieved to have a friend like Hinata. "I don't hate you, Naruto-kun. You're too nice for me to hate. In fact, you're one of my closest friends, and the fact that you had that furball sealed inside you all this time doesn't change it." He felt her embrace him as a tiny tear escaped his eyes. She whispered in his ear, "It's okay to cry, Naruto-kun. I'm here for you." He quickly broke down and gave her a hug in return. Hinata held him and grinned. All he needs right now is a friend. I'll let him know how I feel when he needs something more, she thought. Naruto eventually calmed down, and Hinata made the decision to lift his spirits. You know what? This is actually pretty cool. If you have that thing sealed inside you, you could use its chakra to supercharge your jutsus. She screamed as she got up. She wildly waved her arms. She flailed her arms once more to accentuate her statement. You could be all-powerful and beat anyone you wanted. You'd be unstoppable. Naruto shook his head and laughed. He brought Hinata back down and made her pout, saying, "That's okay, I guess, but if I really want to get stronger, I'm going to have to do this by myself. Besides, his chakra comes at a price. The more chakra I use, the more influence it has over me." She retorted, but Naruto laughed. It's easier to poke holes in ideas than to actually come up with them. Kurenai arrived shortly after, and Shino followed shortly after. Hinata nodded when Naruto whispered to her, "By the way, Hinata, please don't tell anyone about it, I don't really want to take a risk." Kurenai smiled and nodded her head when she and Shino were in front of Naruto and Hinata, which they would soon discover was almost never a good thing. "Well, I'm glad we all came here at the right time and look rested up for today's events. Now, I know that I passed you three and are an official team, but I have one more test you three have to take." Naruto nodded his head while muttering to himself. As long as they weren't demoted, Sino didn't really care if there was another test. He just nodded his head. However, Hinata felt, or at least expressed, differently. "What? Another one? Are you sure that that's a good idea? I mean, remember what happened yesterday?" replied Hinata. Kurenai coughed into her fist, which she had balled up. They all nodded their heads in agreement as she explained, "Ahem, yes Hinata, I do remember what happened yesterday, but this is different. This is an evaluation test to see just how good you three are." Kurenai grinned and began to make hurried hand gestures. As an unseen wind began to blow through her body, she smiled and said, "The test starts now." Not wanting to be ambushed, Team Kurenai put their backs together and surveyed the area. While Shino sent out his bugs to find his sensei, Hinata activated her Byakugan and Naruto prepared to activate the Jikokugan. When nobody saw anything for a while, they somewhat relaxed. Naruto turned to face his teammates, who turned to face him. He said, "So what do we do now?" Hinata questioned, "Should we go after her?" "I think we should wait here, that way we can stand a chance against her. We might just be genin but we might be able to defeat her if we stick together," Shino replied. "Yeah, but the point of this test is to evaluate us, not for us to win in a fight against her. So I'm guessing that she will come to us soon to see where we are lacking in skills in terms of teamwork," Hinata replied. After nodding, Naruto had an epiphany and uttered, "Or maybe what we lack individually." Naruto was dragged screaming into the ground by two arms that sprang up out of the ground like water and grabbed hold of his legs. Hinata jumped to save him and yelled, "Naruto.kun." But before she could reach him, Naruto was absorbed into the ground as though he had fallen into water. After hitting the ground and failing to see anything, Hinata activated her Kekkei Genkei. "I see, it seems like she wants to see how each of yous do separately," Shino concluded. Standing there, Hinata looked everywhere. "Why are you so worried? It's just a test, it is not like she is actually going to hurt him," Shino responded. As Hinata kept looking for Naruto, she yelled, It's because. Shino, I don't have time to play 20 questions," Shino arched an eyebrow. He said more than he inquired, "It is because you like him, is it not?" After a moment of hesitation, Hinata shook her head. Shino responded by shaking his head, but she countered, That's not it, I'm just worried for my comrade." "You cannot fool me. Naruto may not see it but I am not so blind. I see the way you look at him and how you act towards him. All I am asking is why? What is it about him that makes you like him so much?" replied Shino. Hinata gave him a suspicious look but responded, "He is so secluded and has no self-esteem, not to mention that he seems to have some trust issues and an inferiority complex." Hinata began to explain, "It's because, well, I was never as confident as I am now." Flashback. One child remarked, "Your eyes are so weird. Yeah, they're even creepy looking. No wonder your clan is so isolated, they're all ugly." Hinata was crying as she huddled into a ball against the school wall as the boys in the class teased her, saying this and a lot more. The boys continued to laugh until they were drawn to something, or rather, someone else. A faint voice asks the boys, "See, can you leave that girl alone, please?" When Hinata looked up, she saw the boy she had saved. She then noticed the other boys grinning and chasing after Naruto, who fled upon noticing their grins. Although Hinata wanted to get up and assist Naruto, her body would not allow it. Hinata ran in the direction she saw Naruto and the other boys' heads after gathering the strength to stand. Shortly after, she noticed blood on the ground and more blood flowing into an alley nearby. After following the blood trail into the alley, Hinata noticed that it came to a halt in front of a fallen trash can. Even though she was too afraid, she looked inside. Her voice stuck in her throat when she saw Naruto battered and covered in blood. Naruto was much paler than usual, had numerous cuts and bruises, and his left eye was swollen. He was hardly conscious. Without hesitation, she pulled him out of the trash can and took out some of the healing herbs and ointment she always carried in case she got hurt. She began applying the salves to Naruto's wounds and bruises. Other than the occasional wince, Naruto remained composed and motionless. After she was done, she put it away and, since her house was closer, she put Naruto's arm over her shoulder to carry him there. Naruto glanced at Hinata idly during the stroll. Between moans, he said, Why or why you helping me? Again? Hinata tried not to cry as she gave him a smile. Because you helped me and I can't let you die, it's not right, she stated to him. Without saying anything more, Naruto passed out, making it more difficult for Hinata to carry him. However, she didn't want to wake him, not that she could have in any case. Flashback ends. I don't think he remembers me talking to him or saving him at all. He acted as though I never saved him or even talked to him, but that never stopped him from protecting me from the boys who usually picked on me, which kept happening until I had enough and decided to defend myself. Then Naruto wouldn't have to keep getting hurt because of me. I got the confidence I have today because of him, because he never stopped defending me or anyone else who needed help. And that's why I like him. Hinata continued. Shino gazed at her as she fought back the tears that welled up. At last, Shino said, It is more than that, isn't it? More than what? She inquired, her confusion evident. Your feelings from him. It's more than a simple crush, Shino said. Unsure of what to say, Hinata bit her lower lip and turned her head away. Just as it had done to Naruto, two hands grabbed Shino's legs and began to drag him to the ground. Shino wasn't expecting an answer and wasn't going to get one. It appears to be my turn. Hinata said, So it seems, good luck. After giving Hinata a nod, Shino vanished, leaving her to consider what Shino had said. She asked herself, Is there more than that? Then Hinata heard a snap behind her and turned to see Naruto grinning. She was a little taken aback by how fast he finished his test, but she ignored it and approached him. Naruto disappeared when she was within a foot of him and his eyes flashed green. Hinata was kicked in the back, propelling her forward and onto the ground before she could react. Squinting her eyes, she coughed as dust rose and watched Naruto approach her. As she got up and used her Byakugan, Hinata growled, You're not Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes glowed green once more, his smile turned sinister, and he vanished. She was able to dodge his roundhouse kick and deliver an uppercut to his chin while her Byakugan was active. Hinata was ready to hit Naruto with an open palm as he descended after being launched into the air. Hinata had Naruto within her grasp when she used her chakra to charge her hand and cock it back. She then threw the punch precisely at the right moment, almost hitting him in the chest, but his green eyes snapped open and he disappeared, as if he had teleported away in an instant. Hinata spun around, anticipating the imposter's arrival so she could keep beating him. Since she didn't see or hear anything, she took some time to consider the circumstances. While Shino took his evaluation test, she was presently awaiting hers. Suddenly, Naruto came and attacked her. She was aware that it wasn't actually him because he would never attack her without a valid reason and would always discuss it with her before using force. She only knew that she would most likely perform poorly on the evaluation test if the fight went on, but she had no idea who was attacking her or why. Then she realized that Kurenai had only stated that the test had begun and not that they would be taking it one at a time. When Hinata realized that the Naruto she was facing was genuinely testing her fighting skills, she grinned. Beyond the realm of Genjutsu, Naruto sat anxiously next to Kurenai, who had a slight smile on her face but her eyes were closed. What was going on inside the Genjutsu that made her smile so much, Naruto wondered. She frowned once, as though she had heard something disgusting. Her smile then turned from one of affection to one of pride. Unfortunately, the test didn't work that way, despite his strong desire to see how his teammates were performing in comparison to their opponents. He was out of the loop because only the victim and the caster can see the Genjutsu. Leaning back and attempting to fall asleep, Naruto let out a sigh. Kurenai's entire body trembled and she opened her eyes shortly after he closed them. Before he could fall asleep, Naruto realized this and grinned. The test was at last over. When he opened his eyes, he saw Hinata and Shino staring around in surprise and confusion. Shino and Hinata glanced at Kurenai before turning to face Naruto, who was still on the ground, and said, "You three did a good job. You each have a unique skill to contribute to the group and are more than prepared to start missions." Hinata pointed to Naruto and said, "What? Why are you lying down on the floor? Didn't you take the test too?" Naruto simply gave a head nod. "Yes, I did. I fought my fight and Kurenai had asked me to show her everything I had. Once that was done, she released me from the genjutsu and told me to wait until you two were finished," Naruto said softly. When Hinata finally realized what was happening, she grinned and gave Naruto a hug. "Good job, Naruto." Hinata congratulated. Naruto blushed at the close contact and praise. "Thanks, I don't know what you guys did but apparently, it was enough to get you to pass." Hinata nodded but didn't release Naruto from the hug. Kurenai laughed as she walked over to Shino. "You think you'll figure it out?" she asked him. Shino looked at Naruto and Hinata one more time before giving his answer. Kurenai nodded as Shino responded, "Maybe, however, in the little time I have known him it is too hard to tell. He can be very unpredictable." As she began to walk to the academy with Shino in tow, Kurenai gave the order, "Okay, break it up. Now let's go to the academy so we can get our first mission." After letting Naruto go, Hinata pursued the two. Naruto remained distant until he became aware that he had been abandoned. He made a run for his team, trying to catch up. It was a typical day, with the sun shining brightly over Konoha, the villagers going about their daily lives running countless errands, and the shinobi working hard on their designated tasks. One group of shinobi would simply receive their missions while another group completed theirs. After completing their 4th D-rank mission of the day, a specific group of genin were sitting on the ground outside the academy, breathing heavily and taking a break as a light breeze blew past their faces. To inform the Hokage of their successful mission, their sensei went inside for them. As his bugs attempted to cool him down, Shino said, "I can't believe that cat went missing for the 5th time this week." Hinata didn't feel the need to respond immediately, and Naruto nodded in agreement. She didn't necessarily despise the cat. On the contrary, she and the feline had a strong bond. Tora's constant running away from the daimyo's wife and, for some reason, heading toward Konoha was the issue. It's up for debate whether Konoha should view that as a blessing or a curse. Naruto and Shino felt a sudden sympathy for the cat when Hinata said, "I for one can't blame her. Have you seen the way the daimyo's wife hugs the poor thing to death? Well, at least the day is over now. After 4 D-rank missions, I feel like I am about to collapse," said Shino. "Yeah, after pulling all those weeds out of that one woman's lawn, painting an entire 2-story building, baby. Sitting 4 5-year-olds and even chasing after Tora, I'm about ready to head home and sleep for the rest of the day." Hinata grumbled with a frustrated sigh. "And after all is said and done, I still have training with Hanabi and father." Hinata nodded as Shino continued, "I too have family training after this and father insists on updating my insects or at least obtaining a second colony." Shino nodded his head in agreement as Hinata joked, "The things we do for our clan, huh Shino?" Then Hinata became aware of Naruto's extreme silence. It was strange because she and he have been speaking more lately. She learned more about Naruto than she ever would have imagined. He did appear to like a girl, but he chose not to disclose this information. Hinata was given the indication that Naruto did not want to give her that additional detail after she had been asking him questions non-stop for about an hour. She didn't particularly like it, but she decided to ignore it, for the present. Hinata said, "Hey Naruto-kun, why are you so quiet?" But Naruto remained silent. Hinata could tell he was thinking deeply just by looking into his green eyes. Hinata could only speculate as to what it was, but judging by his expression, it wasn't good. Then his face took on a look of timidity, or at least fear. Then, as if he were scared to look up, Naruto's eyes went back to their typical cerulean hue and he turned to face the ground. When Hinata and Shino looked up, they saw Team 7 and their sensei standing across from them. If it isn't the outcasts of the village hidden in the leaves. As he left his team to submit their report, Kakashi said, "Play nice while I go turn in our report, and for once Sasuke, don't start another fight." Sasuke simply sneered and turned back to focus on Team 8. Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and scoffed, "So what have you losers been up to?" Kiba was mildly amused by Sakura's chuckle, but he kept it to himself. He would at least need to pretend that he wasn't against Hinata and her teammates if he wanted a chance with her. "Shut up Uchiha. The only real loser here is you, since all you do is talk. I've never seen a dog with a bigger bark than you," Hinata responded. Kiba's face glowed with laughter. Hinata's words made him want to laugh. Akamaru was equally amused but, like its master, kept it from everyone else. Hinata had no intention of using a pun and only realized it when she noticed Kiba attempting to conceal his smirk. With a haughty smirk, Sasuke retorted, "Those are fighting words, Hyuga. Remember your place." To keep the verbal altercation going, Hinata responded, "Oh, I remember all right, turn around so my foot can find its way back to its place." Sasuke's smirk vanished, and a frown took its place. Sakura screamed, "Hey, you can't talk to Sasuke-kun like that." Without addressing anyone specifically, Hinata remarked, "And here comes the Banshee to protect the hurt pride of the stuck-up prick." Sakura and Sasuke became enraged. Sakura shouted, "I dare you to say that again." With a naive smile, Hinata responded, "What part, the screaming Banshee part or the stuck-up prick?" Slap. The sight they had just witnessed caused everyone's eyes to widen. Sakura was shocked by what she had just done. Hinata lifted her hand to caress the red and now sensitive cheek. She growled and winced at the touch. In fact, Naruto retreated a step, somewhat terrified of Hinata's next move. With a low growl, Hinata threatened, "You're going to pay for that." Sakura was waiting for the pain with her eyes closed when she charged at her. She opened her eyes when she was pain free to find Sasuke standing next to her, his right hand gripping Hinata's right wrist as it prepared to hit Sakura's shoulder. Hinata gave a little cry of pain as his hold on her wrist grew tighter. "Before that blasted Uchiha seriously hurts your mate, do something, brat." The voice of Kyuubi shouted in Naruto's head. Naruto hesitated a little before acting, but his will to protect his friends overcame his insecurity. Hinata was now on her knees, frowning in agony as Sasuke's hold on her wrist became even more tight. With hate and sadism in his voice, Sasuke commanded, "Don't you dare touch my teammate." With her Byakugan blaring, Hinata glanced up at Sasuke. "Eh? At least I can activate. Arg. My dojutsu," she scorned, grinning despite the excruciating pain in her hand. Sasuke gave the mock a grimace and painfully and strangely twisted Hinata's wrist back. Then, as Hinata cried out in agony once more, he cocked his left leg back. With a sly smile, he swung his leg in the direction of Hinata's head, confident that the blow would land. He was unprepared for Naruto's speed and dojutsu. Naruto's right hand stopped the kick just an inch from Hinata's cheek. With his head lowered and his bangs hanging over his eyes, Naruto stood before Hinata. "Please don't hurt my friends. I don't want to fight, but I will if I am forced to." Naruto looked up at Sasuke, his eyes focused on his. Once more, Naruto's eyes shone with a green glow rather than their usual blue, which surprised Sasuke. Another thing that caught him off guard was the swirl that encircles his pupil. However, Sasuke was unfazed by the surprise and gave Hinata a firm shove to release his grip on her wrist. Hinata gazed up at Naruto while holding her hand close to her. Naruto experienced the same anger that he had when Hiroshi used such derogatory language toward Hinata. He felt his canines sharpen and his fingernails grow a little. "That's it, brat. Take advantage of this hatred and welcome it wholeheartedly." From inside his head, Kyuubi screamed in glee and madness, but Naruto mostly ignored it. With Kiba grinning and Sakura grinning behind him, Sasuke boasted, "You won't be able to land one hit on me, let alone hurt me." Silently calculating his chances of defeating them, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Hinata was absent for some time due to what was likely a sprained wrist. With Shino by his side, he should have no trouble defeating Kiba. He might even be able to knock him unconscious before any irreversible harm was done. At best, Sakura would be a nuisance, but it would be sufficient to give Sasuke the upper hand in combat. If things got that bad, Naruto needed to make sure Sakura wouldn't get in the way of his battle. As Sasuke and Naruto kept staring at each other, Kiba and Shino sensed the tension building in the air. Kiba only wanted to watch as the two got into a fight, but Shino was prepared to intervene if Kiba wanted to join in. Sakura was also prepared to enter the battle if Sasuke required it. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of a wind blowing by. Neither dojutsu practitioner batted their eyes or moved. Then he fell and the whole thing was a disaster. Luckily, the man didn't. Kurenai interrupted her story to reveal Sasuke and Naruto looking at one another, seemingly on the verge of murder. Behind her, Kakashi paused and blinked quickly. He was curious as to why she had stopped at the academy's exit. "What's wrong?" inquired Kakashi. Kurenai did not want to draw the genin's attention to Naruto and Sasuke, so he pointed at them. When she pointed, Kakashi's visible eye widened and then relaxed back to its starting position. "We should stop this." Kakashi started to move, but Kurenai stopped him with her hand. "I know." She touched her lips with her index finger before he could ask. She ignored the strange look Kakashi gave her for a while. Sasuke and Naruto, meanwhile, have not yet moved. In an attempt to break up the fight, Hinata stood up, but her wrist unintentionally bent forward at an angle, sending more pain up her arm. Hinata gave a little cry of agony and said, "Ah." The sensation of 1,000 pins and needles piercing her wrist made her wince, and she collapsed onto her knees once more. When Hinata yelled, Naruto blinked and turned to see her holding her wrist. He knelt in front of her and gently took hold of her right hand. Naruto tore off the left sleeve of his shirt and wrapped it as gently and firmly as he could around the injured wrist. Then he tied the knot that held the cloth together with a little more force. Unexpectedly, Naruto lifted Hinata up by placing his hands beneath her knees and on her back. Kakashi was secretly hoping for something from the Icha Icha series, while Kurenai was taken aback by Naruto's abrupt forwardness. Shino and Team 7 kept a close eye on Naruto as he disregarded everyone's attention and even his own uneasiness. Naruto called out to him, his voice devoid of the usual insecurity and meekness, "Shino." He said, "What is it?" Naruto told him bluntly, "Please stay here and let Kurenai Sensei know that I took Hinata to the hospital." Naruto nodded in response to Shino's head nod. However, Sasuke violently grabbed Naruto's left shoulder before he could get away. Sasuke snarled, "You're not going anywhere, Dobi." Naruto dismissed his hand with a shrug. The last thing Sasuke saw of Naruto before he vanished with Hinata in his arms were his bright green eyes. "Not now, Sasuke." After blinking several times, it finally dawned on Sasuke. Naruto was on the run. Sasuke clenched his fist at his side and muttered, "That coward." Sakura was uncertain about what to do, while Kiba and Shino retreated a few paces from the enraged Avenger. Sasuke. When his name was mentioned, Sasuke snarled and turned to face the speaker. Kakashi reprimanded, "I thought I told you to play nice." Sakura trailed behind Sasuke as he simply sneered and left. As Akamaru climbed on his head, Kiba remarked, "If we're done here, Sensei, I think I'll take Akamaru home and rest up for tomorrow." Kakashi sighed as he glanced up to see the position of the sun. "Yeah, it's probably around 7 now, so you can go. Remember, we meet up at 7 in the morning tomorrow," Kakashi stated to Kiba. Under his breath, Kiba muttered, "More like 9:30. "What was that?" inquired Kakashi. Kiba hurriedly said, Nothing, Sensei, I gotta go now." He hurried home, hoping to get rid of his sensei before he asked him any more questions, and his tracks gathered dust. Kakashi let out another sigh and turned to face Shino. As a gust of wind gathered around him, Kakashi said, "Tell Kurenai that I'll catch up with her later." Then he vanished. Shino pushed his sunglasses back with his index finger after glancing at the location where Kakashi used to stand. Shino said more than asked, "I am guessing you heard all of that." Kurenai approached him and gave him a nod. Kurenai said, "Yeah, shall we go find our other comrades?" Shino began to walk toward his house and said, "Not at the moment. They need their time together. Bye and have a nice evening, Kurenai Sensei." Kurenai said, "You too, Shino." She was walking aimlessly, unsure of what to do because her team was unable to train at the moment. Hinata could swear she could feel the pink tint filling her cheeks as all of her blood rushed to them. The sensation on Naruto's firm arms beneath her back and knees was a bit too much to handle. She was too preoccupied to respond to the outside world, which was the only reason she hadn't passed out or spoken yet. On the other hand, Naruto was more focused on Hinata's welfare than their present situation. He was aware that he was overreacting slightly given that Hinata might have only sprained her wrist, but he was powerless to stop himself because his friend's safety and his compassionate nature had greatly outweighed his timidity and self-doubt. Though it didn't stop him, he could feel the strength from earlier start to deter slightly. Naruto halted abruptly and glanced around to make sure he was going in the correct direction. Naruto stopped atop a small building's roof, interrupting Hinata's thoughts, or, better yet, her fantasy. She noticed that the green radiance in his eyes began to fade and that their blue tones had returned. He didn't need his dojutsu as much, as it stopped just short of disappearing. As the wind blew past, his blonde hair blew with it, and his steely eyes kept searching for something. Hinata can only speculate as to why he was so intent on getting her medical help. However, she wasn't griping about Naruto's attention to her. Even though Hinata would have loved to keep receiving his attention, she knew she had to stop him. Naruto was startled out of his reverie and forced to look down at Hinata. Naruto-kun. As he gazed into her lavender orbs, his steely green blue eyes instantly changed to a reassuring and compassionate gaze. Naruto was a bit less submissive than normal as he said, "Yes, Hinata?" When Hinata's cheeks suddenly turned pink, Naruto finally understood what she was saying. "I sprained my wrist. Not my ankle." Naruto's cheeks turned a shade of red that was far more intense than Hinata's pink tint, and he gently helped her stand up. Then, believing that his abrupt forwardness had offended her, he slowly moved away from her. Naruto put both hands behind his back and looked away as he stammered, I'm sorry Hinata, ID. Didn't mean to be so forward. Hinata was holding her sprained wrist and averting her gaze as well. Her cheeks took on a deeper hue as she felt Naruto's sleeve's fabric between her fingers. Hinata's words, "It's okay Naruto-kun. You did what you thought you should and I appreciate it," caused Naruto to feel uneasy. He occasionally experienced this whenever he spent time with Hinata. He described the feeling as perplexing rather than necessarily negative. Naruto kept thinking about the girl, wondering why he always felt so strange around her. With nothing more to say, Naruto started to head toward the hospital, but Hinata's left hand, gripping his shoulder, stopped him. He turned to see Hinata still avoiding eye contact but wearing a defiant expression. Hinata attempted to comfort him by saying, "It's okay Naruto-kun, I'm fine, really." However, after taking a step backwards, she misaligned her wrist, which resulted in further arm pain. "You're not okay Hinata, we should get you to the hospital and quick," Naruto replied. She clenched her teeth in agony and said, "Okay, but take me to my house, we have our own infirmary and it's a lot closer." After giving Hinata a nod, Naruto embraced her. The contact made Hinata flush again, and she glanced up at him. His eyes glowed their typical shade of green, and then Hinata felt her whole body go cold. In less than a second, she was standing in front of the Hyuga compound. To her amazement, it was real when she checked her surroundings to make sure she wasn't having hallucinations. As soon as he saw the compound, Naruto released her and waited for Hinata to awaken. She shook her head and turned to face Naruto after regaining her composure, which took much longer than he had anticipated. Still feeling a little exhausted, she said, "Thanks Naruto-kun, but how'd you do that?" Reminding himself, he spun the swirl in his left eye, "My dojutsu, remember?" At this, Hinata arched an eyebrow, wondering why only his left eye was swirling. Did the right eye handle an unidentified ability while the left eye handled the ability to stop time? Or was he merely trying to brag and she was simply overanalyzing the situation? Hinata walked to the front of the gate and said, "Right, so, shall we head inside?" But Naruto didn't follow, so Hinata turned to face him. "What's wrong, don't you want to come in?" With his hands fumbling behind his back and a startled look of nervousness on his face, Naruto shifted around in his seat. He experienced a queasy feeling in his stomach once more, but this time it wasn't the usual one. He wasn't sure if it would be wise to enter Hinata's house. He didn't know if he and her father got along. Naruto was certain that he would lose one of his two friends in his own age group because of a poor first impression. Naruto said, I have to leave, you see." Hinata simply gave him a strange look. She said, "You gotta go?" And he reluctantly nodded. "Why?" "Yeah, I have tea. This thing to d.do and it'll tea. Take me a while too." Naruto halted his stuttering justification and looked up to see Hinata staring back at him with teary eyes. "Naruto-kun." She was holding them together with slouched shoulders and trembling hands. It broke Naruto's heart to see Hinata crying, something he hoped would never happen again. Hinata's words were killing Naruto slowly and silently. "You don't have to make up excuses. I was going to invite you inside so I can at least repay you for saving me from Sasuke, but I see you don't want to. If you don't want to spend time with me, that's all you had to say." However, Hinata's subsequent words and actions were what ultimately killed Naruto. I'll be fine." She forced a smile to come to her lips as silent tears streamed down her eyes. Then she turned and walked slowly toward the front gate. Naruto was left feeling depressed and broken. Was what everyone in the village said about him accurate, and was he really that horrible a person? If he had just brought tears to the eyes of his first close friends, it had to be. He only cared about making amends to Hinata, regardless of how he did it. Hinata heard Naruto say, "Hinata wait," in the loudest voice she had ever heard him use. Wiping a tear from her eye, she turned. She smirked to herself but kept it to herself. Her tone was innocent as she asked, "What is it Naruto-kun?" Naruto approached the gate and let Hinata in. She kept blinking at him, and he only gave her a little smile in return for her perplexed expression. Her expression was hopeful as she asked, "So you're coming inside with me?" She wiped away another tear as Naruto nodded once more. Without injuring herself, she put her small arms around Naruto's torso and rested her left cheek against his chest. Content with the warmth she received from his body, she closed her eyes. This was the closest Naruto had ever been to Hinata, and his face glowed like a Christmas tree. He was accustomed to her embracing him, but this time it was different. For starters, it was much closer, and this embrace simply exudes a deeper sense of warmth and mystery. Shyly, Naruto reached out to embrace Hinata, unintentionally drawing her nearer to him. Hinata breathed a sigh of relief absently. Then a sensation swept through her whole body, and she opened her eyes. She stepped back from Naruto's embrace and blushed as she glanced at her feet. It's unbelievable that I let my guard down. Father will definitely want to talk to me now that I was caught hugging him, Hinata thought as she turned on her Byakugan to look inside her home without turning her head. Then she sighed and turned it off. Nosy, Dad. Her tone was overly sweet as she said, sorry, Naruto-kun. I guess I was just happy that you don't hate me. However, Naruto shook his head, unaware of the false goodwill in her voice. With his own blush, Naruto said, it's okay, Hinata. Hinata started to move in the direction of the compound and said, so, let's go inside, it's getting a little cold outside, don't you think? After nodding and taking a step forward, Naruto halted when he felt eyes peering through the back of his skull. He noticed the blonde man wearing the black cloak from earlier when he turned to look behind him. With his hood pulled over his head, the cloaked man's face was hidden from view except for the green glow in his eyes. He nodded his head in his direction and grinned at him. After giving it some thought, Naruto shook his head. In an attempt to catch up with Hinata, he hurried up to her, but she abruptly stopped. Actually, Naruto felt his dojutsu reactivate and everything around him stopped. Suddenly, Naruto felt a presence behind him. In a monotone, the presence said, I need to talk to you, Naruto. Naruto turned, his face unreadable as he gazed at the man. Naruto approached the unclean man with the blonde hair and said, you lied to me. With a disinterested tone, the man replied, and what about, if I may ask? Naruto was offended by his tone, but he ignored it. Naruto accused him, but the older man simply shook his head. You told me my Kekkei Genkai could stop time, but I ran into someone a couple of days ago who told me that it could not control time but just gives me an extreme regulation of electrical currents. I only told you what was passed down to me by my own father. While I did say that our eyes control time, I never said I believed it. It did seem rather arrogant to say that we had the power to control time. The man began to rant. In any case, that's not why I'm here. Naruto, suspicious of the man, questioned, so why are you here? The fact that he knew the man could likely kill him before he could blink made it difficult to trust someone he barely knew. The older man in front of him glanced at Hinata and behind Naruto. With a hint of rage in his eyes, Naruto glanced back at him after turning to face whatever he was staring at. Naruto asked angrily, why are you looking at her? When Sasuke first attempted and succeeded in harming Hinata, Naruto would fight to defend his friends regardless of the man's strength if he attempted anything amusing with her. Naruto clenched his fist firmly on his side but displayed no other signs of rage. I can see why you are attracted to her, Naruto. She will grow up to be a fine young lady. This shocked Naruto so much that he retreated a few steps and nearly stumbled on his own feet. Whoa, calm down, Naruto, I didn't mean it that way. I was just saying that you've made a nice choice in terms of a life partner. Naruto questioned, what do you mean life partner? Nothing, forget what I said, you will find out sooner or later. What I came here to tell you is that to be wary of the Uchiha brat. The man replied to Naruto. Naruto cocked his head to the side and said, I haven't sensed the evil in him since Orochimaru. Naruto questioned, the Sannin Orochimaru? Is Sasuke really that evil? Only time will tell, a lot can happen in such a short amount of time, but I doubt the brat will change anytime soon. Just remember to avoid him if possible, it won't do to antagonize the entire village if you end up hurting the boy. Naruto raised his eyebrows. Naruto nodded his head once more and asked, also, have you read the scroll I gave you? Yes, it didn't make any sense though. What was with all the seals and writing on it? Asked Naruto. I am unsure myself. Your father left it for you, again, I'd like to tell you who he was but I probably shouldn't. Naruto stopped the older man and even startled him by asking, my father was a Namikaze, wasn't he? How'd you, with a hint of optimism, Naruto questioned, that man I fought, Hiroshi, told me of my clan. The Namikaze clan. Is that what you are, a Namikaze? He struggled to maintain his composure, and the man avoided looking at him. He muttered something about taking care of Hiroshi later while cursing him under his breath. The man's jaded right eye dimmed and changed to a dark blue one that resembled Naruto's, and he said, yes, I am. Normally, since it was just an eye color, this wouldn't prove much. This was unique, though, because this eye color was uncommon in Konoha and the surrounding areas. Even then, it wasn't the same as the Yamanaka clan, which was the only clan with the closest eye color. Are you my father? He inquired, a little frightened of the response. The man replied, no, I am not, but I am a relative of yours. He went on, my name is Taken, Namikaze Taken. I am your uncle. Naruto glared at his uncle and refrained from attacking Taken, which was not his usual behavior. Through his repressed anger and grief, he questioned, Why? Why didn't you come looking for me before when I needed it most? Taken fought the impulse to give Naruto a direct look. You were better off here, where it was safer. I live a life that not even an Anbu could withstand. I know what you've gone through is just as bad, if not worse than an average Anbu, but it still can't compare to mine. Taken said with a solemn face. If I had a different life, then things would have been different. I might have even been able to help this village out tremendously just by being here. Sadly, the road I chose for my life was not the wisest, so now I pay for it. Taken's single cerulean eye returned to its jaded hue as he glanced back up at Naruto. There was absolutely no emotion in his eyes. He appeared to be attempting to repress them in order to carry on with his meeting with Naruto. I see. Naruto couldn't say anything. The words, constant beatings, berating, isolation, and emptiness could all be used to characterize his life thus far. He believed that no one shared his terrible life, and he has yet to meet anyone who has had a life comparable to his. However, it seems that his uncle's life was worse than his own. With as little emotion as possible, Taken added, anyway, I also came to warn you of your next mission. Despite raising an eyebrow, Naruto remained silent. Taken stepped forward and touched Naruto's shoulder tenderly. Naruto noticed that his hand had a fingerless glove on it and that the Konoha symbol was scratched on the metal behind it. That girl up there, Taken remarked, pointing to Hinata's twisted figure with his free hand. Taken's eyes hardened as the intensity of his Jikokugen increased. Will be in harm's way in the upcoming mission. While she will never be safe considering that she chose the life of a kunyachi, this opposing force will be too much for her and your team to handle, and if you are not careful, Naruto, you will lose her. Although Naruto's eyes widened in worry, he maintained his composure and released a breath he was unaware he was holding. How do you know? Naruto uttered the question, shaken by the suddenness of the warning. Taken stood up and moved away from Naruto, saying, if you had read the entire scroll, you would know how I know of this. After that, he removed his hood and ran his fingers through his blonde hair. I must go. It is dangerous for both of you to be near me for so long. Taken's cloak caught fire, and a tiny flame began to shoot upward, consuming him completely. The fire kept moving upward, and the parts beneath him vanished. His upper torso was all that remained of the man, but it was also rapidly vanishing. Goodbye for now, Naruto, and remember, watch after the girl with your life or you'll regret it later. Because of his uncle's last minute smile, Naruto suddenly remembered something. With a smile that made him more like the fourth, Taken closed his eyes and asked, wait, was the fourth Hokage my father? He only exclaimed, another time Naruto. Before the fire engulfed him. With a curse at his timing, Naruto gazed off into space. That cannot be a coincidence. A hand was placed gently on Naruto's shoulder, and he was told, I look like him in the fourth, he's my uncle, so that could mean. Naruto was allowed no more time to think about his muse. He recoiled and glanced back. Hinata's face was filled with worry as she gazed at him. She said, Naruto-kun, are you okay? Naruto gave her a grudging smile and shook his head. After pausing for a moment, Naruto had an idea. Yeah, I'm fine. If it's okay with you, Hinata, I kind of want to go home. I mean unless you don't want me to. He continued. Hinata gave Naruto a cold, calculating look. The point was that he appeared anxious, not that she didn't want him to go. In fact, she did. Well, more than normal, anyway. She repeated, are you sure you're okay, Naruto-kun? Naruto simply gave a head nod. He tried to look exhausted as he said, why? Yeah, I just used the Jikokugen too much today and now my eyes are tired. Though she wasn't sure if anyone else could tell, Hinata was aware of his lies at all times. But this time, Hinata had to respect that he was serious about something and needed some alone time. Hinata smiled candidly and said, okay Naruto-kun, I'll see you tomorrow then. Naruto nodded once more with a slightly widened smile. After saying, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, good night. Naruto turned to leave the Hyuga compound at that point. Hinata reluctantly watched him go. With a sigh of exhaustion, she entered her house with the impression that she and her father would be having a lengthy conversation about boys. Her father was standing with his arms crossed and his typical stoic face when she entered her house. She would assume that he always looked that way, even when he was sleeping, if she didn't know that the entire stoic expression was a front. She gave a grudging, silent groan and nodded her head. She turned around, put her good hand on her hip, and forced herself to look stoic. Making fun of her father, she remarked, Hinata, I need to have a word with you in my office. Then she turned once more, her expression changing from one of stoicism to one of exhaustion. She shot back to herself, but father, I'm really tired and I think I sprained my wrist. With a stoic expression, Hinata turned around once more and said, "Besides, it wasn't like I kissed him or anything. Even though that might be the case, we still need to speak. After saying that, you can go to the infirmary to have your wrist examined." Hinata moaned and passed the Hyuga head on his way directly to his office. With an angry moan, she told herself, fathers are so difficult to deal with sometimes. In the meantime, Haishi had chuckled at his daughter's strange demonstration of their hypothetical dialogue. He shook his head and laughed to himself before pursuing Hinata. As he shut his office door, he thought to himself, I taught her well. After a week, behind the doors leading to the room where the Hokage and Iruka were assigning missions to different Genin and Shunin teams, Team 8 waited calmly. Kurenai and Shino stood between Naruto and Hinata, who were on opposite sides of their team. Both were attempting to calm their fluttering emotions and heartbeats after having an awkward situation no more than an hour ago. Hinata's loud and convincing words convinced the entire team to make a solemn vow. Everything that transpired between Team 8 remained between Team 8. Naruto and Hinata never stopped staring at one another, with one averting their gaze just before the other did. Kurenai could only watch in frustration and amusement. She thought it was cute that neither of them knew the other's emotions, but she also found it annoying. Even though it's cute, it might make their mission less successful or even result in their deaths. That is, if they received anything better than a D-ranked mission, which Kurenai didn't think would happen very soon. Shino, on the other hand, was merely praying for a miracle to spare his teammates from the humiliation they had endured earlier in the day. With the incident still fresh in his mind and hilarious at that, Shino's mouth twitched upward ever so slightly under the cover of his high collar. The door beside them opened after 5 minutes of waiting, and Team 10 left the room while their sensei held their mission scroll. Kurenai and her group were waiting just outside the door when Asuma looked up. His teeth gripped the lit cigarette, and he couldn't help but smile as his chain smoking mouth cracked. Kurenai forced a smile on her lips as she looked up and said, "Hey." She couldn't honestly say she liked the veteran Junin, but she didn't harbor any animosity toward him. The chain smoker had no regard for their leader, who happened to be his father, and always found a way to smoke at the most inconvenient times. Even though they did have a difficult past, he still had to act professional around him. "Good morning, Asuma." She turned to face his team and saw Shikamaru wearing his typical stoic expression, Choji chomping away at some chips she was certain he had magically made appear, and Ino adjusting her hair with a tiny black comb. "I see your team is well prepared to take on their missions today," she said. Asuma felt the sarcasm seeping into her voice, but he still nodded his head. Kurenai frowned at him when he turned away from her, once more upset by his disrespect for their Hokage. "Yes, so if you'll excuse us, we'll be going now, and by the way, the old man's waiting for you." Her Genin team immediately followed her as she got up and entered the room. As they enter, they discover that the room is quite large, with the Hokage and Iruka seated at one end and several Chunin standing close by, seemingly on guard. Iruka heard Team 8 enter the room, but the Hokage was too preoccupied to notice them because he was reading a scroll. "Ah, Kurenai, Naruto, Hinata and Shino. How are you four?" Iruka responded. Shino replied, "Very well, Iruka. Sensei." Hinata and Naruto simply nodded. The Hokage looked up at Team 8 and grinned as he placed the scroll in his hands and intertwined his fingers. Team 8 and Kurenai both bowed, and she cleared her throat when she stood back up. "Good morning, Hokage." "Sama." The Hokage said more than he asked. "Good morning, Kurenai, Team 8. I assume you were here to get your mission." The Hokage sighed as Kurenai nodded. The room fell silent as the Hokage's words sank into Team 8's consciousness. "I see, well, as much as I'd hate to say it, we have run out of D-rank missions for you." Stuttering, Hinata said, Excuse me?" The Hokage cleared his throat and shifted in his chair. The Hokage began to say, "This year's and last year's Genin teams are handling all of our D-rank missions. All we have left is a low C-rank mission," but stopped when he saw Hinata's expression. He counted down from 3 as a mental alarm went off in his mind. 2. 1. She shouted, "We'll take it," and her team recoiled at the volume of her voice. Hinata ignored Kurenai's reprimand, as she worked to obtain that C-rank mission. The Hokage stood with a menacing smirk as Iruka prepared to chastise her and give her a lecture about how the entire mission and ranks function. He walked around the desk and up to Team 8, asking, "So you think you can handle a C-rank mission already?" He assessed each Team 8 member's response to his query by glancing at them. Naruto avoided making eye contact because he was still apprehensive about the elderly man and couldn't fully assess him. A naive smile adorned Hinata's lips as her eye gleamed with mischievous intentness. The Hokage could tell by Shino's body language that he also wanted to accept the C-rank mission, even though his eyes were hidden behind his sunglasses. Kurenai maintained her composure, but the Hokage knew that Kurenai didn't like the idea and wasn't just called the professor. Yes, of course. Our team has done at least 4 or 5 D-rank missions every day while the others settle for less, said Hinata. Hinata nodded eagerly as Shino said, I agree with my comrade. This will be very beneficial for us to get a hands-on approach to the actual shinobi world. As Kurenai prayed for a miracle to occur, she noticed that the window was rapidly closing. The third Hokage's remark, you seem less than happy about the news, Kurenai, caught her off guard and caused her to tense up and straighten her posture. Kurenai made her regret it a moment later when she told him, oh, of course not, Hokage. Sama. My team is more than capable of handling a simple C-rank mission. She didn't know why she said that out of the blue without first considering it. Knowing that they would now receive the mission, she let out a defeated sigh. She simply believed that it was a little too early for their first C-rank mission, not because she didn't believe in her team's abilities. The third asked, jolting the ninja out of his reverie, and what do you have to say about this, Naruto? Kurenai thanked whoever was listening for sending her a miracle, closed her eyes, and grinned contentedly. Oh, Well, Naruto made a concerted effort to maintain eye contact with the Hokage, but it was never able to last more than 2 seconds. Both of his teammates were standing to Naruto's right, and they both gave him a look that seemed to say yes. Naruto felt his heart beating at what he was certain were inhuman speeds and his mind racing under the new pressure. His uncle's warning began to influence Naruto's choice as it replayed in his mind, and if you are not careful, Naruto, you will lose her. Currently, his choice could determine whether they go out into the world to finish the C-rank mission or train until more D-rank missions come up. Naruto was growing increasingly adamant about not going on the mission as the time went on. He believed that a C-rank mission was not worth the loss of Hinata's life. Naruto glanced quickly at Hinata one last time before dismissing the mission idea. She wanted this more than anything else, and that was one of the many things he could tell from her expression. Before he could even reconsider his choice, Naruto spoke with this in mind. He stammered, startling both himself and Kurenai, I think we're ready. The Hokage and Hinata both grinned broadly, and Shino simply nodded. Iruka was, to put it mildly, stunned. Iruka inquired, more out of concern for his former pupils than anything else, Hokage. Sama, you're not really going to let them do the C-rank mission, are you? As he returned to his seat behind the desk, the Hokage merely grinned. I don't see why not. It's a fairly simple mission, and should any problems arise, Kurenai here will be here to help them. If anyone doesn't have anything else to add to the conversation. The third Hokage took a moment to clear his throat. Bring him in. Suddenly, a drunken man holding a bottle of sake emerged from the door to the left of Team 8. His gray beard was soiled from some food he had eaten, and his face looked worn out. In an attempt to prevent the man's stench from ever returning to her senses, Hinata closed her eyes, clamped her right hand over her nose, and held her breath. The third Hokage, who could hardly stand his stench, said, Tazuna-san, I see that you are late. Fortunately for everyone in the room, the inebriated elderly man left without saying anything. I am quite busy right now introducing this team to their clients, so if you don't mind, you may leave. Your team is waiting right outside as we speak. Everyone exhaled in relief as the man shut the door, and then they inhaled the clean air. The Hokage inhaled fresh air for a minute, then redirected Team 8's focus by coughing into his hand. The Hokage commanded, as I was saying, please bring the client in. The door that had previously been opened by the inebriated man reopened, and a new man entered the room. He wore dirt green pants, brown boots, a bag slung over his shoulder and chest, a pale orange hat, and a dark teal jacket with a darker teal obi tied around his waist. The man bowed to the Hokage and Team 8 and said, Good morning, my name is Yorinoshi. Team 8 and the Hokage bowed back. So this is the group who's going to help move our stuff out of the land of vegetables. The third Hokage smirked behind his intertwined fingers and said, Yes, they are. They will help you move your products out of the land of vegetables and to the land of nano. I see, thank you, Hokage. Sama. We must go as soon as possible, the other peddlers are already traveling to the land of nano and I promised that I'd bring help. 3 shinobi, 2 standing beside him and 1 sitting on a branch, were observing the land of vegetable from a distance. One of the 3 shinobi remarked, It appears that preparations have been finished. He was dressed in a light red, outlined purple sleeveless jacket. He also had on arm guards and a sleeveless shirt in a dark blue, green color. He wore pale silver pants and an orange obi. 3 purple triangles that pointed at the middle of his nose were visible on his face. 1 on his forehead, 1 on his right cheek, and 1 on his left. The wind blew through his long brown hair. The second shinobi inquired, Is this the land of vegetable you were talking about? He didn't feel guilty about eating a lot healthier than the other two. Aside from the jacket and pants, he also wore the same outfit as the original ninja. Rather, they had a pale yellow obi and were light lavender. His long dark silver hair occasionally obscured the two triangles painted beneath each of his eyes. The final shinobi, pushing aside his purple hair, added, "Well, it's a small country, but it'll probably have enough manpower to start it." He wore the same clothes as his fellows, except for tinted brown trousers. He had a sky blue triangle painted directly beneath his chin and sky blue teardrops painted on both cheeks. With his arms crossed over his chest, the first shinobi declared, "We'll get complete compensation from that leader. With our signal, this country will be turned upside down." Then he turned and gazed with his dark yellow eyes at his fellows. "As of today, we are this country's feudal lords." The second shinobi asked rhetorically, "Feudal lords, huh?" This made the third shinobi laugh. He declared, "It has a nice ring to it." Then he looked back at them with his ruby-red eyes. "Doesn't it?" As the small army of renegade shinobi prepared for the event, a resounding, "Yes sir," was heard. They were all dressed in the same attire as their three renegade leaders, Renga, Jiga, and Ruiga, also known as the three criminal brothers. In Hinata's mind, she was a very simple girl. Neither the luxury her clan offered her nor costly items really appealed to her. No, she would prefer to live a normal life instead of her opulent one. One in which she would be able to run outside with her friends all day without worrying about how it would make her clan appear, one in which there would be no clan issues to worry them, and one in which there would be no main and side branches to split her family. As the unassuming young lady that she was, Hinata could only futilely attempt to control her joy at last leaving her hometown, if only temporarily. Although her village could occasionally become dull, she didn't despise it. As she passed through the massive front gate, which allowed passing villagers, shinobi, and merchants to enter or exit, she walked joyfully and excitedly in front of the other members of her team. Kurenai grinned at Hinata's antics despite the feeling of dread in her stomach. Given that she is the heiress to one of Konoha's oldest and most arrogant clans, she thought she was a very strange girl. Aburame Shino, another heir to a Konoha clan, was standing next to her. Even though he was thrilled to be on a mission that involved more than menial tasks, he chose to hide his excitement by keeping his hands in his jacket pockets and focusing on the task at hand. But Naruto, Kurenai turned wisely and glanced around. Kurenai asked, "Where's Naruto?" As Hinata sighed and stopped moving, Yorinoshi and Shino also paused, wondering where the blonde genin had gone. Kurenai dismissed them after they introduced themselves to Yorinoshi, telling them to pack for a 2-week trip and return to the village gates in an hour. Kurenai sighed in sadness as Yorinoshi said, "I know you are missing your other student, but my friends desperately need help with their products." Kurenai said regretfully, "He's right. We can't put the mission on hold because Naruto isn't here." She commanded, "Let's go." Yorinoshi accompanied her as she left the village. Shino glanced at Hinata, who seemed to be will-dotting something to happen while keeping her sights set on the village. "Hinata, Kurenai is right. While I too do not want to leave without him, we cannot stop whatever we are doing just because he isn't here. It is his own fault that he was not able to attend the mission on time and we cannot let the mission fail because of it." Shino made it clear. Hinata felt it was improper to embark on their first C-ranked mission without their third teammate, even though she knew he was correct. With a nod, Hinata dashed to join Kurenai and Yorinoshi. But Shino lamented as he turned to face the village. Perhaps their team would have become closer if Naruto had simply appeared. They only had rudimentary knowledge about one another and blind faith in one another thus far. They may have become a closer team as a result of this mission, but now. Shino gave a dissatisfied shake of his head. If Naruto missed the mission, whatever he was doing had to be very important. Shino was right, in a sense. Naruto had just left his house and was now running toward the village gates. He nearly passed out from the amount of time he spent packing and meditating, cursing his bad timing as he glanced at a nearby clock. He was shocked to discover that, contrary to his initial belief, he had not fully opened the scroll when he took another crack at it from his uncle. The Jikokugan apparently offered the user more than just the ability to use lightning. However, Naruto wasn't able to go in depth on the specifics when he was suddenly pulled into his own mindscape. He shivered at the memory as he reached the gates with a ragged breath. Putting his hands on his knees and inhaling deeply, Naruto sat down, doubling over. He knew it was easier using his dojutsu to make it to the gates, but he didn't want to waste chakra in doing something so trivial. Standing up again, Naruto could faintly see trace his team's scent. Naruto was not about to miss his chance to prove to everyone that he was not a failure, but more of all, he wasn't about to let his first real friend perish in the hands of a stranger. While he really had no idea what his uncle meant, he did know that Hinata was in danger. He was the cause of their C-ranked mission and he would rather die than be the reason why his friends died. Dropping down on all fours, Naruto ran in the direction of his team as he ran quicker than when he ran on two legs. He thought it was strange that he was faster on all fours, but he assumed it was because of Kyuubi. Naruto began sniffing the air, pushing the thought of the evil demon from his mind, and proceeded along the path he was now following. But all of a sudden he realized that his actions were not his own. He never ran on all fours or sniffed the air like some sort of animal. It's his influence. Naruto thought as he stopped running and stood up straight. He refused. He refused to be anything like the monster that attacked his home and had cost the greatest shinobi his life and the reason behind the village's hate towards him. Pumping chakra into his feet, Naruto ran down the trail with newfound speed and with a more determined look on his face. He will live his life justly and honorably at all costs. So, you brat, are you rejecting my assistance? Kyuubi asked angrily yet entertained inside Naruto's head. Naruto ignored Kyuubi's voice. It did not benefit him to talk to the chakra beast at the moment. You little snot. Why are you acting so cold toward me? I've only ever tried to help you when you needed it. Kyuubi's sarcastic tone was beginning to irritate Naruto. It took a lot to aggravate Naruto, and besides Kyuubi at the moment, the only one to ever aggravate Naruto to a point where you wished nothing more than to hurt the person was Sasuke. Even then, it was only when he was either hurting Hinata physically, emotionally or spiritually. It was odd for it to go to such an extreme as spiritually, but with the Sharingan running through his blood, he didn't doubt that Sasuke would sink so low. Listen you brat, while I have to respect your ability to hold off the temptation of using my powers, I won't be ignored by some lowly kid with a confidence problem and who can't even defend himself. Do you understand? Kyuubi asked as his voice started getting louder and angrier. Kyuubi snorted in disgust when Naruto's voice and influence began to fade and he failed to reply. Very well then, you ignore me now, but when you need it most, I will deny your request of borrowing some of my power. Let me warn you, no brat, you will regret this. Naruto hated how ominous and eerie Kyuubi's warning sounded. Naruto jumped into the nearest tree and started jumping from branch to branch, trying to reach the peak of the tree. After he reached the top, he started to look ahead of the trail, hoping to either see his team or a sign that they passed through. Naruto really wished he had Hinata's Byakugan. It would be really useful at the moment. About 2 miles in front of him, Naruto could see the trail come to an end, leading to a rocky path that led into the mountains. His team must be close now, as he knew they were somewhere along the trail. Jumping down from the top of the tree top, Naruto gracefully dropped to the ground and started to run towards the end of the trail, hoping to run into his team. He just hoped nothing happened yet. Hinata, meanwhile, was only able to perspire while engaging in her current activity. For Kami's sake, she was a girl, so why was she pushing the cart full of the peddler's merchandise? While she did appreciate that Shino was with her to push the cart as they began to tread up the mountainside, she was really hoping to take it easy on the mission, or at least a little more action. All she wanted was something straightforward, like a group of bandits attempting to steal the goods and women, or something like that. However, no, they were making her push the cart while a small girl rode on top. A guy pulled from the front with an elderly woman and a young woman walking leisurely besides him. Behind her was another cart being pulled by a stronger-looking man with another man pushing from behind. Walking besides that man was a teenage boy who looked so stoic that if Hinata didn't know any better, looked a miniature version of her father, besides the obvious differences. Hinata furiously raised an eyebrow. She was aware that if nothing exciting happened, she would lose it quickly. Just as she was about to let out a loud groan, Kurenai's voice snapped her into attention. Kurenai announced, Hinata. She said, sounding surprised. We're going to be taking a break now, so if you'd like, you can go with Shino and that little girl Momiji to get some water for the rest of us. Kurenai told her. Hinata nodded as she, along with Shino and Momiji, walked into the forest with empty bottles to fill with water. It didn't take long for them to find a lake nearby a cliff, overlooking the western side of the mountain, the direction where the land of Nano was. As Hinata filled up the bottles, Momiji traveled to the cliff to watch the forest in a better view. Shino, ever so cautious, walked to the little girl as she looked oddly at the forest. Momiji glanced at Shino and said, before indicating the direction of the land of Nano. Momiji asked in a naive tone, what's that? To Shino's surprise, a tiny cloud of smoke appeared from somewhere in the forest as he looked in the direction she indicated. Shino called out, Hinata. Hinata glanced up, got up, and walked over, only to see the burning cloud too. I'll go check it out. Shino nodded and Hinata jumped down from the cliff, and after elegantly landing on her feet, she sprang forward and towards the smoke. Shino looked down at the girl and remarked, this will be a secret between the three of us. It will not be good to panic everyone if this turns out to be nothing more than a small fire. Momiji nodded and she jumped on his back as they headed back to the others with 4 filled bottles of water. Kurenai went back with the others, but Hinata was not with them. She asked, "Where's Hinata?" Kurenai gave a sympathetic nod and stopped there. She had to use the bathroom. But the elder men's younger cousin Shun, Kakusuke, and Yorinoshi exchanged glances. "Let's keep going. I'm sure Hinata will be able to catch up," Yorinoshi stated, earning nods from everyone as they got into formation and started pushing or pulling the carts. With a growl and a hunger pang, Momiji sat atop one of the carts and held her stomach. The sounds of a bag of chips caught her attention from her side. Looking in that direction, she saw Shun holding the bag of chips. Momiji crawled over to that side and reached for the chips, but Shun yanked her away. Momiji hesitated as Shun said, "Tell me what you saw first." With Hinata, she was trying to figure her way around the forest, trying to find the border to Nano country. She ducked as a handful of shuriken tried to embed themselves into her. Before rolling to the side to avoid more shuriken, she screamed, "The hell?" as she leapt off the branch she was on and onto the ground. Hinata avoided every shuriken that was thrown at her and landed beneath some bushes, using moves that would make a skilled dancer green with envy. "Who are you?" she asked. "You pest. By the symbol engraved in your headband, I'd say you're from Konoha," a voice said from everywhere at the same time. She shouted, "So what if it is?" She searched for the enemy threat, calling forth her bloodline. "What do you want with me? I have no intention of fighting you. As inconvenient as it is, the person we're looking for are heading this way." The individual replied. A kunai with a piece of paper fastened to it materialized in front of Hinata, declaring, "Anyone else who strays into our territory must be killed immediately." She wasted no time jumping into the air and onto the branch of a nearby tree before the explosive tag detonated. She wasn't given much time to breath as 7 shuriken drilled themselves into her back and she fell face first onto the unforgiving ground. 2 ninjas leapt down from their hiding spots and asked, "Did you get her?" They both wore pale silver pants and an orange obi, and a dark blue, green sleeveless shirt with matching arm guards. Both were surprised to see a log wearing a blue trench coat, and when one kicked it angrily, it activated the explosive tag attached to it. They jumped back as the log exploded, blowing them back. Hinata grinned and sprinted in the direction of the others from the side of a tree a short distance away. She knew the odds were against her, even though she would have loved to stay and fight. She dashed to the other's location as fast and silently as she could. Sometimes like this, she wished she had Naruto's dojutsu. She felt that freezing those 2 and tying them up to be taken to interrogation was much more expedient and helpful than closing their chakra points. Hinata saw the peddlers and her team. Well, the majority of them, and skidded to a stop in front of them, gasping for air. "We need to talk," Hinata said, looking at Yorinoshi, who seemed to be guilty of something though hid it very well. It was a disaster in the land of greens. Black clouds of smoke rose from the burned carcass of carts and buildings. Inside the daimyo's castle, gold, silver and many other valuable and expensive items lay thrown on the ground. "Is that all the daimyo has?" Renga, the leader of the criminal brothers, asked as he lay on top of the gold. The shortest of the 3, Ruiga, responded, "They supposedly had a kind daimyo, a selfless one. He couldn't have overindulged. This is all we'll be able to squeeze from him." "As much as I admire the small amount of wealth, were you able to find the girl?" asked Renga. Jiga, the fat one, frowned. Renga grinned and shifted comfortably in his place. "No, the 2 pursuing her returned badly injured and empty-handed. Though we do know in which direction she's heading off to." Renga sighed as she peered out the balcony as the sun began to set, saying, "That girl is our only problem. If she is able to escape, she may get military support from another country and come back." Ruiga took 2 steps back and dropped into his battle stance, spinning his tonfa rapidly around. "If only the sun was a little higher. I could probably use my techniques to toast the lot of them. Then I'll go." Renga grinned, but as soon as he heard footsteps approaching, his gaze strayed to the stairs. A fat man in his mid-50s, wearing a common kimono worn by council members, ran up to Renga and bowed before him. He had a blad head with black hair still on the side. "Renga Sama, I've gathered together all the collaborators in the plaza, just as you said," the elderly gentleman replied. The old man smiled maliciously and said, "Well done. If it weren't for your help, we would not have been able to take this castle too easily." Jiba exclaimed, "Hey big bro, how about I go greet the people in the plaza?" Ruiga and Jiba nodded and left their brother alone with the fat old man, saying, "Sure, I'll just stay here. There are a few things I need to take care of." The elderly man rubbed his hands together and said avariciously, "So, Renga Sama, about our promise. Renga responded casually, promise. Oh, that's right. Very well, take as much of the gold as you see fit. The elderly man bent down and began searching through the numerous gold pieces, jewels of all shapes and sizes, and everything else that was in front of him. Renga stood over the elderly man and took one of the 2 katana that were behind his back. The old man was too preoccupied with collecting his portion of the profit to notice Renga standing over him, his hands fingering the katana's hilt. It's so easy to trick people who are naive and gullible. With support, the elderly man said, seriously, it's just as you say, the daimyo even believed in us up to the end. When the old man looked up, he was shocked to see Renga standing over him with his katana partially out of its sheath. Nay, nay. If you take that much gold, you might be too heavy to make it to the afterlife. Renga grinned as she saw the old man perspire. You're quite right, only an idiot who trusts someone as deceitful as you, she said, taking out the entire katana and placing it in the middle of the man's neck. The elderly man was now trembling because he was afraid for his life, especially since you already betrayed one master. The old man begged, this must be a joke, Renga, Sama. No, I'm afraid it's no joke. The sounds of blood. Curtailing screams erupted from the plaza at that precise moment. The old man's head was turned toward the plaza when it clicked in his mind. Before the old man could finish, Renga pulled the katana aside and cut through his head. So that's it. The reason you had me gather the collaborators together in the plaza was so you could, says Renga. As the old man's head rolled off his head and his body struck the ground with a dull thud, Renga said, you wanted your reward, well here it is. The gold pieces and jewels the man had placed in his kimono flew to the ground, into the pool of his own blood, as his arms flew sideways. As he lay beneath a tree, Naruto panted and sweat trickled down his brow. Even though he had a mission to complete, the amount of running he had to do was extremely exhausting, particularly for his legs. Naruto stood up, grunting, stretched his legs, and got ready to run once more. He was aware that his team was close by and that he would not be excluded from the mission. Though he was curious about Kurenai and Hinata's whereabouts, Naruto grinned when he saw Shino assisting with pushing one cart. Naruto chose to take a shortcut in order to get to them more quickly, looking in the direction they were going. Naruto leaps to the top, gasping when he sees what appears to be a battlefield in front of him. He was even more shocked when it was wet after he leapt from the top of the ridge to the ground. What happened here? He asked, without naming anyone. His instinct told him to be vigilant, so he put on a stoic face and ran, following the path of fallen trees, asking, and why is the ground so wet? The sight of a dead body lying face down on the ground made Naruto stop cold. His clothes were ripped and covered in blood, and the body was damp. What kind of wounds are those? Naruto asked, referring to the hundreds or even thousands of punctures on the body in front of him. They reminded Naruto a lot of the people who had been attacked by Senbon needles. The man began coughing up blood just as Naruto was leaving to locate his team. Naruto gasped and dropped to his knees, carefully rolling the man onto his back. He said, Who are you? He shivered uncontrollably, and his mouth and wounds continued to bleed. Feeling for the man's pulse, Naruto replied, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's fear for the man's life increased as it grew weaker and fainter. Naruto nodded as the man said, So you're the one who forgot to show up. The man shook his head and coughed violently once more, saying, I'm sorry about that. Forget about me. Please, why don't you have to save Lady Haruna? Please make sure she makes it to the land of Nano alive. The man begged. The man, struggling to seize Naruto's collar, added, Please. Despite not knowing who or what the man was referring to, Naruto nodded his head. The man grinned as he lost all of his strength, released Naruto's collar, and closed his eyes. The man said, Thank you. One final time before his chest became so relaxed that it was immobile. Naruto cast a sorrowful and empathetic glance down at the man. Naruto quickly got to his feet and ran in Hinata's direction. Shino was pushing the cart and silently contemplating their predicament. Momiji's eyes were on him. As the girl with the brown hair asked, Shino, is something wrong? Momiji's question jolted Shino out of his reverie, and he looked up. He replied stoically, Of course not, everything is great. The water droplets caught everyone's attention and froze in midair before Momiji could ask another question. Shino stopped pushing the cart and looked around, his instincts ringing loudly in his mind. He helped Momiji down from the top of the cart and commanded, Everyone gather around me, don't leave my sight. The water droplets came together and began to encircle Shino's group in a dome of water as everyone gathered around him. He frowned. Then he looked around and saw that they were no longer by his side. Everyone, get under the cart, quickly, it's much safer there. When Shino looked down, he saw Momiji and the other elderly people hiding beneath the cart. We're already down here. Sweating, he used his index finger to scratch his chin. He remarked, that was quick. Shino raised his head to see someone leaping through the dome's tiny gap before it shut entirely. The individual stayed down after landing atop the cart. Naruto? Shino exclaimed. After giving him a serious look, Naruto nodded and reached into his kunai pouch. Shino bowed and said, get down. Naruto produced 4 kunai knives, each of which had an explosive tag fastened to it. They all dug into the water dome after he threw them all in different directions. A second later it exploded, scattering the water dome. The water shot into the air, soaking everything in its path and covering the atmosphere. Still suspicious that the enemy might be close, Naruto's gaze swept over the whole area. Naruto. As usual, Naruto's expression was unreadable as he looked down at Shino. As he leapt to the ground and landed beside Shino, he questioned, what happened, Shino? He questioned, not that I am not glad you are here, but, what are you doing here? Naruto's seriousness abruptly disappeared, and his timidity reappeared. Well, I didn't want to miss our first C-rank mission, so I decided to try to catch up to everyone. He replied. So why were you attacked? And where's Kurenai? Sensei and Hinata? He inquired. We encountered some minor trouble earlier today. It seems that we took the longer route because we believed that someone in our group was being targeted by a renegade nin and that we were merely in the way. However, we were mistaken, and Shun devised a plan whereby we would split into 2 groups. The slower-moving group and the faster group. Given that there were more of them, Kurenai, Sensei and Hinata chose the faster group. I am not sure, Shino said, putting his hands in the folds of his jacket before shrugging. As for why we were attacked. However, I do wonder why they simply left. Isn't it clear? An elderly woman said, you don't shop at a store that doesn't have what you want. Naruto and Shino exchanged glances before giving the woman a crazy look. The woman sighed when she saw their bewildered expression. If the shop is sold out of the thing you want, then you would go to another shop, correct? So, you're implying that the target is with the other group and not with us? The old woman nodded when Shino asked, and Naruto glanced at both of them before focusing on Shino. What does that signify, then? Naruto inquired. Hinata and Kurenai. Sensei are having problems. We need to move quickly, so everyone, get rid of anything that weighs you down or that you don't need. As the elderly began to gather their belongings, Shino gave the order. Oh no, Hinata. Kurenai walked up to the front and said, it'd be dangerous to continue the travel at night. The people pushing the cart immediately stopped and turned to face Kurenai, who said, okay, we're going to set up camp now. At the sound of another cart approaching, Kurenai and Hinata tensed, and everyone turned to look behind them and saw Naruto pushing a smaller looking cart with Shino and the others. Naruto and Shino dropped the cart and squatted down with their hands on their knees as soon as they were close enough. Naruto-kun? Hinata inquired, and Naruto looked up, grinning wearily. Kurenai was also taken aback by Naruto's appearance, but she remained enraged. Shino. Why are you here? Remember, we have a plan to follow. Kurenai demanded explanations. Shino assisted those on the cart in getting down and replied, I'm sorry, Kurenai. Sensei, but the situation has changed. Helping the people on the cart down, Naruto went on, it seems that someone in your group is keeping valuable information from us. And what it is, Shino and I are sure that's why this group is being targeted. But why and by whom is that information being withheld from us? Hinata inquired. From what I was able to conclude, everything points to Shun and Urinoshi, Shino said. What are you trying to say? With a tone of offense, I asked Shun. Shino shot back, lives are on the line, now isn't the time to lie. Everyone stared at Naruto as if he had grown a second head, and he added solemnly, and one life was already taken. What? Shun asked. I'm not sure who he was, but I found him at badly injured back along the path. He seemed to be from this group since he knew who I was. Naruto continued. No, Shun stammered. Not Kakusuke. With a sad tone, Urinoshi said. If that's the case, you are also aware of the motivation behind our targeting. If you were truly peddlers, there should have been no justification for having him outfitted in case of a fight, Naruto continued. So, what's actually happening? Kurenai inquired mischievously. Shun obstinately stated, I'm under no obligation to tell you anything. Don't you see that you're endangering not just yourself but everyone here if you don't tell us why we're being chased? Is that what you want? To waste the lives of these innocent people? Hinata screamed at Shun. It's okay. Really it is. Team 8 stared at Kurenai incredulously, but she turned away from them and looked at Shun. We don't have to do anything for these people because this C mission is now ranked AB. Possibly even an A. Come on. As the other members of Team 8 exchanged doubtful glances, she began to walk down the trail, and soon they were following her. Kikuho. Kurenai dropped to one knee as Yorinoshi spoke, loud enough to halt him and Team 8. That must be Kakusuke's real name, am I right? Shino inquired. According to Yorinojo, it was, and my real name is not Yorinoshi, it's Yorinojo. Remain silent. In a composed manner, Shun said, but Yorinojo shook his head. He's not even a boy, and Shun isn't really his name either. The person standing next to me is Lady Haruna, the only daughter of the daimyo of the Land of Green. The people gathered around Haruna, whispering to each other about how much she had grown. Team 8 was taken aback by the unexpected disclosure. Naruto said softly, so you're Lady Haruna. Hinata gave him a quick glance before turning to Yorinojo. Lady Haruna, please. What these shinobi say is true. We must not let this people die just because we want to keep our secret to ourselves. Haruna, on the other hand, laughed. So why is this prickly princess traveling with a group of traitors in the first place? Hinata asked directly, and Kurenai was about to reprimand her when Yorinojo interrupted. We left for Lady Haruna's safety. We've learned of coup being planned in the Land of Greens. Our land was very peaceful and fertile one, but was by no means a prosperous one. Before we could even blink, half of the officials were bribed and turned on our glorious daimyo. But, who would do such a thing? Naruto inquired. They are referred to as the criminal brothers or the Janin. They traveled across the ocean to reach us. Janin? Shino inquired. I am aware of them, yes. Yorinojo nodded as Kurenai stated. They are known by that name because of the lethal ninjutsu they have in their arsenal. They are incredibly cruel, killing a lot of people, including innocent people. They don't care about the people they kill as long as it helps them. They could be irresponsible for anyone but themselves and lack consciousness, Yorinojo continued. Why, though, would they attack your territory? Meekly, Naruto asked. We don't currently know that. The daimyo had to disguise his heir as a peddler and hide among the actual peddlers in order to ensure her safety. Under the guise of a protection job, Kikuho and I were hired to protect Lady Haruna, but we weren't sure we could handle it, so we commissioned you shinobi as a backup. We ought to have been aware of this type of information from the start. What prevented you from telling us? Kurenai told them to respond without asking. My safety is top priority. If I told anyone that I was traveling with peddlers, then word would have got out and this whole thing would have been pointless. Haruna replied with a smug smile. Besides, if I would have mentioned it, you would have just run away. Hey listen princess. We're not the type of shinobi to give up so easily. And perhaps Kikuho would still be alive if we had known you were the heir to the Land of Greens, Hinata retorted. How are you aware of that? Who's to say you wouldn't have met the same end if one of you had taken Kikujo's place? She inquired. Shino said, we can hold our own, thank you. What were you thinking, too? Are you so arrogant that you believe you are superior to women and children? That they are so insignificant that they could be used as your scapegoat while you run away? Hinata inquired. That's right, is there a problem? Everyone was speechless. Not one thing came to mind, no way to comment such a heartless answer. So what if a few people died for me? If something should happen to the Land of Greens, I would be the only one whose blood runs with royalty. Even if it is obliterated, I could return one day and bring it back to its former glory. Is that all that matters to you? Hinata didn't wait for a reply as she appeared in front of Haruna and thrust an open palm forward. Before it was able to make contact, Yorinojo stepped in the middle. The open palm struck his lung and he doubled over. Hinata gasped as Yorinojo resisted the urge to throw up. Please, forgive Lady Haruna. Have you lost it? Don't you remember that you were hired to protect me from harm, not cause it? Did Haruna ask? Our mission actually doesn't mention protecting the heir to the Land of Greens. It just says that we must protect and assist in transporting the cargo to the Land of Nano. Additionally, as I previously stated, safeguarding a well-known figurehead like you is, at the very least, considered an A-rank mission. I gave my team the task of defending the peddlers against roving bandits. Protecting you puts my team in a completely different risk, one that I'm not willing to put my team through, Kurenai told Haruna. So, now you're going to abandon me at my time of need? Haruna snarled. So now you trust us to protect you? Hinata asked sarcastically. I will protect you with my life, Lady Haruna, Yorinojo stated dutifully. Be quiet, Yorinojo. Kikuho was more skilled than you, but even he fell at the hands of our enemy. What makes you think you could succeed where Kikuho failed? Haruna barked. Because I was destined to do that. To Haruna's surprise, Yorinojo responded, I will risk my life for you because it is my fate. If you need someone to protect Lady Haruna, then I suggest you return to the village with us and file your request for the protection of Lady Haruna under an A-rank mission, like it's supposed to be, Kurenai suggested. There's no time, we need to travel to Nano to request their help, Yorinojo stated. Then I'm sorry, there's not much we can do at this point. Kurenai once again walked away from the peddlers and Yorinojo and Haruna. Team 8 followed shortly, except for Naruto. Naruto, what are you waiting for? Kurenai asked. I'm sorry, but I can't go back, Naruto replied, puzzling his team. Naruto.kun. Why? Hinata inquired. Because Kikuho asked me to assist in ensuring Lady Haruna survived her journey to the land of Nano just before he died. And I'm going to do that, Naruto declared resolutely. Shino attempted to persuade his teammate to reconsider by saying, Naruto, I respect the determination you have to help Lady Haruna, but it is not our mission and we'll be risking our lives. It's okay if that's true. As he walked over to the front cart, Naruto retorted, I agreed to protect Lady Haruna, so I will keep my word and see it through to the very end. He leaned down and raised the handle, just as he was ready to leave, when a second pair of hands grabbed it as well. Naruto looked up, surprised to see Hinata grinning at him. She concurred with Naruto that, if Naruto.kun is going to go through with this, then so will I. Yorinojo said, thank you. Kurenai sighed and turned to face Shino. So, would you like to go on too? She inquired. Shino remained silent as he watched Hinata, Naruto, and the others gather their belongings and head to the land of Nano. Yes, as a team, I say we continue. Kurenai gazed up at the sky, seemingly under Kami's influence. All right, we'll keep you safe and won't go just yet, but I did mean what I said about going at night. Haruna looked at Naruto incredulously before scoffing and leaving everyone behind, Yorinojo at his heels. Let's set up camp and we'll head out at sunrise, Yorinojo said, smiling at the assurance that Haruna would have a better chance of surviving.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.